Be on.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We have quorum in the room, and so I'm going to call this meeting to order. It's the 33rd meeting of the Executive Committee, and I want to welcome all the members of the committee and the members of council who are here with us this morning, and also our public servants and members of the public and the media. And may I just say at the outset a couple of things. Number one, I want to just say as I was answering a question about the storm the other day, I didn't spend enough time with the media just in the last few minutes saying thank you to all of our people spread across the emergency management office, which I visited on Sunday, the Toronto Hydro, who did a superb job, I think, hooking most people up fairly quickly who had hydro outages. 311 took an increased number of calls, and the list goes on. Of course, our police and firefighters and others who dealt with some of the consequences of the storm on Sunday. So on your behalf, I just want to say thank you to them for a job very well done. And there's always learnings that come from these experiences, but I think by and large the city as a whole, including the people, handled the storm very well. Secondly, may I just make mention of the fact that sitting to my left here for the first time is Juliana Carboni, who's of course the acting city manager, and in a moment of weakness she accepted that responsibility. But you know, she has my complete confidence, and I know the confidence of my colleagues in City Council, and I know the confidence of the public service as she proceeds to, as she's well entrenched doing already, as she proceeds to carry out a very difficult and complex and very important job on behalf of the people of Toronto. So Juliana, welcome to that chair. I can't think of much good that goes with it, but there's a lot of responsibility that goes with it. So good luck. Yeah, here. May I, on all of our behalfs, acknowledge that we're meeting today on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation, of the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, and home to many diverse Indigenous peoples. We try to make sure that we make the proceedings of this committee accessible, as we do with all things that go on here at City Hall, and I would remind people they can watch us on YouTube at Toronto City Council Live, or follow the meeting on their computer, tablet, or smartphone at www.toronto.ca/council. May I first ask if there are any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, and if you have such an interest to declare, please indicate the item number and the nature of the interest. Seeing none, Councillor Pasternak.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just in an abundance of caution, I'd like to declare an interest in EX 33.18, project cost increase in cash flow adjustments, 2018-2027 capital budgets. It's directly tied to some capital funds for Toronto Public Library, which my wife, although on leave, technically is still an employee.
Thank you, Councillor Pasternak. Any other declarations? Okay, seeing none, may I have a motion to confirm the minutes of the Executive Committee meeting of March 19th, 2018? Councillor McMahon, all those in favour? Opposed? Carried. So we have quite a lengthy agenda in front of us today. It has, I think, 18 items, but 3 or 4 of them I think are going to take some time because they're very important matters for the well-being of the city. And we have many members of the community who've indicated an interest to speak. And so I was going to propose for your consideration, in the interest of making sure everybody has a chance to be heard in a reasonable time, a motion that the clerk will put up that simply, as we've done before when we have many deputants, limited the time for deputations, speaking time, and questioning of deputants and others to 3 minutes. And so that motion is there. And it applies to all members of council, including the executive committee. And I would ask, I'm making that motion. I would ask for your, all those in favor. I'll call the question on that. Opposed? Carried. So that motion is carried. Let's proceed then with the rundown of the agenda. And item 33.1, the Smart Track implementation report is being held for both the presentation and for deputation. Item 33.2, expanded gaming at Woodbine Racetrack, city conditions, is being held for deputations. Item 33.3, EX 33.3, development charges bylaw review, results of additional consultation, is being held for deputations. Item EX 33.4, George Street revitalization procurement strategy. You want to hold it or move it? Councilor Bylaw is moving the recommendations, staff recommendations. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item 33.5, public consultation results and update on the vacant home tax. There's a suggested disposition that the recommendation in the report be accepted, which is to do some further research. Is there someone to move that recommendation? Councillor Thompson. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item 33.6, Emergency Management Program Update 2017, and this is a recommendation to receive the report. A motion to receive the report, Councillor Palacio. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item EX 33.7, Update on Ground Lease Amendment. Yes, I'm sorry.
Number 6, I hold number 6.
Yes, I think we just carried it, but we'll then hold it. That's fine. That's the emergency management one? Yeah, okay. Item 33.7, ground lease update on the ground lease amendment for the Toronto Transit Commission lands at Yonge Eglinton, Canada Square. Motion to accept the staff recommendations, which are also coming. If that's the case, there's a motion I think you had to put at the same time, just to, because it comes with an endorsement from the Transit Commission. There's a slight amendment the clerk has made to the motion, really just purely technical, which she can put up. So it simply says that the recommendations from the Toronto Transit Commission from its meeting April 16th, 2018, namely yesterday, be adopted, and that recommendation 2 in the staff report be adopted, which is giving the authority to the city to enter into all the agreements necessary to give effect to this arrangement. Motion to approve. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item 33.8, I think is actually being held for a presentation and for deputations. EX 33.8, that's Smart Cities Challenge. EX 33.9, remuneration and expenses of members of council. The recommendation here is to receive the report. Is there a motion to receive the report? Moved by Councillor Thompson. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item EX 33.10, program advisory bodies, key activities for 2017. And it's again to receive the report for information as the staff recommendation. Moved by Councillor Pasternak. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item EX 33.11, the 2018 education tax levy and clawback rates. And the recommendations here are that this go to City Council without recommendation, and that the interim chief financial officer report directly to City Council on this matter. I think that's because we're still awaiting some further details on that. So that's the recommendation here. May I have a motion to accept the staff recommendation? Councillor McMahon. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item 33.12, the annual report on the city's loan and loan guarantee portfolios. Motion to approve from Councillor DeGiorgio. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item 33.13, acreage and tonnage taxation systems for railway rights-of-way. Again, this is a report just to be received for information. Motion by councilor Ainsley to accept the staff recommendation.
Sorry,
you wanna
I have
hold
a
it?
motion on this, Mayor Tory, but I don't think it's ready. Is it
Oh, okay, we'll hold that
So
down.
I'll hold it, please.
Hold it down. 33.13 is being held. 33.14, capital budget adjustments, EX 3314, 2018 capital budget adjustments for carry forward funding. And there's a motion to accept the recommendations, which is with regard to $841 million from unspent capital projects. You want to hold it or move it? Move it. Councillor Crawford, the budget chief, moving that. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item EX 33.15, Association of Community Centers Settlement of Operating Results for the year ended 2016. And there's a recommendation here with respect to accumulated surpluses and deficits to be dealt with. Moved by Councillor Crawford. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item 33.16, EX 33.16, Toronto Water 2017 year-end capital budget and 2018 to 2026 capital plan adjustments. There's recommendations in the report with respect to the reallocation of some funds across both from last year and across the 10-year plan. Moved by Councillor Crawford. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item 33.17, EX 33.17, adjustments and accelerations to the Parks, Forestry and Recreation 2018 capital budget and 2019 to 2027 capital plan. And again, there's various adjustments that are proposed there. It's moved by Councillor Crawford. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item EX 33.18, project cost increases and cash flow adjustments 2018 to 2027 capital budgets and plans for the Bessarion project for Parks, Forestry and Recreation, Toronto Public Library and Toronto Parking Authority. Is that moved by Councillor McMahon? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay. So,
Mayor,
yes, Councillor Blatzer.
on a point of privilege, on item 33.9, and that's remuneration and expense to members of council, I want to be recorded on the negative.
Sorry, I'm just getting to 33.9. This is the expenses of council. What did you want to do with that?
I would like to be recorded on the negative on that one,
Recorded as
in the negative.
in the negative. So you wanted to have just have
Just that.
Madam Clerk, do we then, if Councillor Palacio wants to be recorded in the negative on 33.9, which we already voted on, do we have to have a recorded vote? All right. Can we go back then and have a recorded vote on and this is a motion to receive the report for information, EX 33.9, and we'll have a recorded vote on that.
All those in favor? Councillor Ainsley, Councillor Balau, Councillor Burnside, Councillor Crawford, Councillor DeGiorgio, Councillor McMahon, Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong, Mayor Tory. All those in favor?
We're just finishing a record. Councillor Pasternak, we're just to you on a recorded vote on 33.9, which Councillor Palacio asked for, and we were to you. And you sat down and you haven't voted yet, so you voted in favor, or? Okay.
Okay. And Councillor Thompson. All those opposed? Councillor Palacio.
Thank you.
Passes.
Thank you. Okay, so that brings us back to item EX 33.1. Oh, and I had one more thing. Could I just propose, ladies and gentlemen of the committee, that we time item EX 33.2, expanded gaming at Woodbine, to make that the first item after lunch if we finished Smart Track by then, just because there's a lot of people wanting to be heard on these different items, and it gives them a degree of certainty. And that we then, that's a motion that I'd propose for your consideration. All those in favor? Opposed? Carry. Okay, so we have 33.1, and there's a presentation, I believe, that's to be made. So I would ask those who are going to make that presentation to come forward.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, members of committee. Thank you for this opportunity to provide an overview of our report.
Sorry, Juliana, just before we get too far along, there's hubbub in this corner of the room, and there's a little bit of hubbub over there, and if we could just kind of keep that to zero, that would be great, so that we can hear the presentation. Thank you.
So presenting with me today is Joe Fragg. You're all familiar with him. He's our acting or interim CFO. So the report that's before committee today addresses two interrelated programs of work. We have the Smart Track Stations program, as well as Metrolinx's Regional Express Rail, or RER program. That RER program includes the Union Station Enhancement Project. So these are major transit programs that are significant in both scope and complexity, and they're foundational to achieving an integrated regional transit network. So as a reminder, the Smart Track project includes two components. There's the Smart Track Stations program, as well as the extension of the Eglinton West LRT that's going to be expanded from Mount Dennis to Renforth and onto the airport. Now, this report, though, before you today only deals with the 6 Smart Track stations. They're highlighted in those blue circles on the map, and those stations are the St. Clair Old Weston and King Liberty stations. Those are on the Kitchener-Go corridor. We have East Harbour and Gerard-Carlaw, which are on Lakeshore East, and Lawrence Kennedy and Finch Kennedy, which are on the Stouffville line. Now, just keep in mind that the Eglinton West LRT, that extension, is at an earlier stage of work in comparison to the Smart Track stations themselves. So as per the council direction back in December, staff are doing further work with a community work group to understand and investigate different grade options, and there will be a further report on that particular component coming in 2019. So since 2015, city staff have been working in partnership with Metrolinx, Ministry of Transportation, and the TTC to advance the Smart Track stations. And the work completed to date includes the planning and design of the stations, a business case analysis. We've established some cost-sharing principles, and we've approved a stage gate process, which is highlighted here on this slide, and that allows for phased decision-making. So the stations program is currently at stage gate 5. So the report before you today seeks council approval to commit funding to this project and to request Metrolinx to proceed with the procurement and construction of the stations. In 2016, council reviewed and approved an initial business case that was developed for the station program, and that business case defined the scope of the project, which included the 6 new stations, as well as the service concept of 6 to 10 minutes during peak service hours and 15 minutes during off-peak hours. That business also confirmed that the benefits for the program exceeded the costs. Now, more recently, Metrolinx has updated that business case, and that updated business case reconfirms the positive benefit-cost ratio, and it also reiterates the strategic benefits of the 6 stations. So the findings show that the East Harbour and King Liberty stations benefit from their close proximity to current or proposed employment nodes. So that supports both population and employment growth, and the other 4 stations are expected to attract boardings from nearby residential areas. So planning staff have been working with Metrolinx to refine the station design and requirements, and in December of last year, council approved the concepts for the station in order to proceed with the environmental assessment. Now, through that design process, 2 infrastructure requirements emerged. We have the base station infrastructure, which is basically the infrastructure that's required for base station operations, and then there's city-initiated station requirements. And those represent elements that council has requested, then that staff are recommending through extensive consultation and input from the community. Those elements will enhance station access and ensure a seamless connection to our TTC service in Toronto's urban context. But keep in mind that both components or both categories of infrastructure are necessary for operations, and they need to be procured and constructed at the same time. Now, staff are also recommending that what we refer to as additional city infrastructure be included in the procurement package for the Smart Track stations as optional items that will be priced separately. And the only project that's under this particular category is the St. Clair Transportation Master Plan. You'll recall that Council asked us to ensure that this master plan was coordinated with the smart track stations. This coordination will minimize construction disruption, shorten the construction period, and lower the overall construction costs. So once the bids are in and staff have had an opportunity to analyze those bids, we can determine if the price is reasonable and whether or not to proceed with that particular element based on budget availability. In 2016, you'll recall that Council approved a summary term sheet for this smart track stations. That term sheet identified things like our cost-sharing principles, roles and responsibilities between the partners, the stage gate process that we talked about, as well as some key conditions that needed to be satisfied. So what this slide does is it compares a few of the key terms that were approved in 2016 by Council with the refined business terms that have been developed based on further due diligence and joint interest negotiations with the parties. So with respect to the cost-sharing principles, the term sheet from 2016 would have had the city be responsible for 100% of any incremental cost associated with the construction of those 6 stations. At the time, that was estimated at just under $1.3 billion, and that estimate did not include any financing or AFP costs. So the report before you today recommends that the city provide a capped contribution to Metrolinx of up to $1.195 billion for the base station infrastructure, and that payment would be subject to the city being satisfied that those service levels that Council approved, the 6 to 10 minutes, 15 minutes off-peak, is going to be met, and up to $268 million for the city-initiated requirements. So the refined terms offer Council cost certainty with respect to the construction of these stations. Now, in terms of operating and maintenance, Metrolinx will assume full responsibility under the updated terms for O&M costs. They'll also retain all of the related revenues. This is expected to be cost neutral or better for the city. So keep in mind that the 6 stations that recently opened on the Toronto-York Spadina subway extension, the operating and maintenance cost after you net out any revenues are approximately $25 million a year. TTC provides a subsidy, the city provides a subsidy to TTC. I think that's about 27%. And also the province provides a subsidy for the GO service. So we do expect that this particular term will be beneficial to the city. In terms of the fares, both of the city's key requests that are identified on this slide are being addressed. The Go Fare program was implemented in January of this year, and through the 2018 Ontario budget, the province has committed to improve access to the Go network, including a $3 fare for all Go trips within Toronto. And I'm now going to just turn it over to Joe to walk you through the funding and financing strategy.
Thank you, Julie. Mr. Mayor, committee members, just by way of a quick background, back in November of 2016, Council did in fact adopt a cost-sharing term sheet. And when it did so, it adopted a preliminary financing and funding strategy. That strategy contemplated the use of 3 key elements, 3 key funding sources, development charges, tax increment financing, as well as a property tax increase. Council directed staff to come back with a more robust financial strategy at Stage Gate 5, which is where we are today. This next slide, Mr. Mayor, identifies for you a summary of the financial plan that's proposed in the staff report. As the city manager noted, the city's contribution is capped at $1.46 billion. We've assumed in the financial pro forma that a 40% federal contribution in accordance with the recently announced PITA funding Phase 2 federal program. That amounts to roughly $585 million that we expect to be remitted by the federal government to the initiative, which leaves us with $878 million as our net contribution expected to be made in 2025 upon substantial completion of the project. Now, because the contribution is being made for an asset that has a useful life of 50 to 100 years, we're proposing that we amortize our city's contribution by way of debt financing. So in effect, we would be borrowing in 2025, and the proceeds of that debt issuance would fund the contribution. Associated with that issuance is a debt charge, and the debt charges would flow for a period of 30 years, commensurate with the bond term. In order to fund those debt charges, which we anticipate to be in the order of about $53 million annually, we propose to rely on three key sources of funding. Again, they include development charges, tax incremental revenues, and the proceeds from the city building fund. I'm going to discuss these in much greater detail over the course of the next few slides. Development charges, which is the first source of funding, are expected to generate about $17.4 million annually to service that debt. The capital costs associated with the Smart Track initiative are in fact included in the development charges background study, which is before council at today's meeting as item EX 33.3. If City Council ultimately adopts the DC bylaw as proposed by city staff, we can expect to generate in the order of about $500 to $550 million annually. And so the $17.4 million that we're estimating for Smart Track, for the Smart Track initiative, comprises roughly 3% of that revenue stream, that DC revenue stream. So it's not at all unreasonable to expect that DCs will generate that kind of funding. The use of development charges to fund transit expansion projects is in fact consistent with the approach that we've been using for the past decade to fund such infrastructure as the Shepherd Subway, the Toronto-York Spadina Subway extension, as well as the planned Scarborough Subway extension. The second source of revenue that we are proposing is tax increment financing. And I just wanted to spend a little bit of time on this because I think in the past some critics have felt that city staff were a little bit too optimistic in terms of the revenue potential of this financing tool. And so the graph that's before you illustrates the TIF concept. The idea here is that a municipality establishes a TIF district, which is an area that benefits from public investment. And once a municipality invests in public infrastructure, that investment leads to incremental property taxes, incremental private development, which raises values and generates additional taxes. So in this particular chart, the baseline tax area, which is the area in gray, these are the taxes that would flow to the city in the absence of the public investment. And then with the public investment, the city realizes incremental taxes that are shown in the green area. And that incremental taxes are available in effect in whole or in part to fund the debt service costs associated with the initial investment. So once the debt is retired, and in this particular case, it will be over a course of 30 years, then the new incremental taxes would come back to the city to be used for general purposes. TIF is a concept that's predominantly used in the States. It has never been used in Ontario, although we do have legislation that was adopted by the province back in 2008. This slide provides you the details of the TIF analysis in relation to the Smart Track proposal. We estimate that over the course of a 25-year time frame, the city would realize roughly $4.5 billion in tax revenue in new development in the corridor. $3 billion of this revenue would have happened with or without Smart Track. So really the increment is that's available to the city is only $1.42 billion, again, over a course of a 25-year period. We had Hemson Consulting retained to assess the impact that new development would generate on additional services that would be required to accommodate that new development. And their report concludes that about 60% of that TIF revenue, that incremental revenue, is required to service that new development. So what's really available to the city is shown at the bottom of that chart, $460 million over the course of 25 years, which translates roughly into $17.5 million annually. The last funding source for the debt is the city building fund. You may recall, Mr. Mayor, Council adopted this levy in 2017, and the levy amounts to 0.5% implemented in 5 tranches until 2021 for a total of 2.5% tax levy. This levy is expected to generate $74 million annually, and the proceeds from that levy are designated by council to fund investments in transit as well as affordable housing. We're proposing to use about a quarter of this levy, roughly $18 million, to fund the balance of the debt service costs associated with Smart Track. So the financial plan has benefited from a considerable amount of third-party review and advice, most notably Hempson Consulting and Ernst & Young. Both of these reports validate the city's approach to the financing plan and are available for council and public review online. In summary, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to point out that the revised term sheet represents a much better financial outcome compared to the council-approved term sheet back in November of 2016. And Ms. Carboni, highlighted the reasons behind that perspective. The financial strategy that's proposed in the report represents a prudent and, in our view, a fiscally responsible approach to implementing this transit investment. Specifically, the city's contribution is capped. We're no longer exposed to any potential cost overruns. The city is not responsible for any operating and maintenance costs, nor are we responsible for the life cycle costs of the transit initiative. Financing is reasonable. It's been verified by a number of third parties. The debt obligations remain well below our debt service guidelines. The city's contribution is not required until 2025, and it's subject to the city being completely satisfied that the service concept by Metrolinx has been met. There's no additional property tax increase required, and there are no additional debt structures or investments that are required beyond those that are outlined in the report. So assuming today's report is adopted, the next steps for the Smart Track program would include developing legal agreements with Metrolinx. These would be based on the terms summarized in Attachment 1. We propose to hire 20 temporary staff, and this staff complement would be dedicated entirely to supporting the implementation of the program. Metrolinx is proceeding in this year to implement the RFP for Smart Track. Construction is slated to begin in 2020. And planning and design will be refined to inform the RFP process. I know the city property services division is engaged with Metrolinx on proceeding to acquire and secure both private and public properties for the initiative. And that concludes my part of the presentation.
So I just want to quickly talk about Metrolinx's Regional Express Rail, or RER program. It's a $13.5 billion transformational program that will expand significantly the service on core portions of the GO network by 2024-25. Now, keep in mind that a significant portion of the capital works that are associated with RER is located within the City of Toronto and Union Station. And as such, that RER program is going to require continued and ongoing collaboration and partnership between the city and Metrolinx. So the work to support this, there's been a number of activities that are being undertaken. We have a governance structure between the parties that's been established. The city's major capital infrastructure coordination team is coordinating the technical input, and their work is being supported by the city manager's office, and there are many divisions involved. Dedicated staff are being brought in and retained to help implement the RER program. Those will be fully funded by Metrolinx, and there's 32 full-time FTEs that we are retaining on a temporary basis. A new master agreement is being developed, and that will establish the relationship framework between the city and Metrolinx as we move forward with this work. And staff are currently assessing what, if any, delegated authorities might be needed in order to ensure that the city can support Metrolinx in meeting the aggressive schedule for this program. And there will be future reports coming to council on any delegated authorities we might be recommending. The Metrolinx Union Station Enhancement Project, which is part of RER, it's part of a program of planned improvement at Union Station, and those improvements are needed in order to support the increased service levels and riderships through Union Station that are associated with the RER program. The enhancement project is actually at the south of Union Station, and it is separate and very distinct from the city's Union Station revitalization program. The enhancement project includes expanded platforms at the south end of the train shed and a new concourse below grade that'll connect Bay Street, York Street, as well as the ACC. Now, given that the city owns much of the property and air rights required for this enhancement project at Union Station, the recommendations in this report will actually enable the city to work with Metrolinx to advance this important work, this important project, while ensuring that the city's assets and interests are represented. We also recognize that the RER program is going to create some significant demand on Union Station's the different access points and pedestrian routes. So as such, the city and Metrolinx are going to need to further review and discuss the requirements to complete that northwest path connection to the York GO concourse, and that's going to be needed in order to ensure efficient flow of passengers in and out of Union Station. The report is seeking Council's approval to negotiate an agreement with Metrolinx to support the expansion project, including the Northwest Path and an updated cost-sharing agreement. And we plan to report out before the council recess on a recommended agreement. So in conclusion, the RER program is set to be completed by 2024-25, and the next steps include Metrolinx issuing an RFP for the Union Station Enhancement Project. That RFP should be issued, if not this week, definitely this month, and construction is anticipated for that particular component to be completed in 2022. We're developing that agreement with Metrolinx to establish a framework for our partnership. We're proceeding with hiring the 32 staff that are fully funded by Metrolinx. We're conducting our due diligence in reviewing the city lands that are going to be required for RER to understand which of the city properties meet the criteria that are summarized on the slide and thus could be conveyed to Metrolinx at a nominal consideration. But I want to be clear. We're only going to be conveying those lands that are not needed for any municipal purpose and that will only be used for transit purposes. Now, based on a review to date, we do anticipate that the majority of those properties are smaller slivers of properties, but we're going to complete our review and our due diligence before any of the properties are conveyed or transferred. So as I mentioned at the beginning of our presentation, these are major capital transit investments by all three orders of government. They're foundational to achieving an integrated regional transit network and also for providing more mobility options for Torontonians. These programs, needless to say, are going to require intense collaboration, partnership with Metrolinx and the province, and the city staff are fully supportive of moving these projects forward while ensuring that the city's interests and assets are well and appropriately represented. So thank you for your time, Mr. Mayor, Committee.
Thank you very much to our public service team for all their hard work and for that presentation. So what I would propose to do with the committee's concurrence is to have the group that have just presented stand down while we listen to the deputations and ask questions of the deputants, and then we'll have one consolidated period with all that input to ask questions of staff, including these people and all the other colleagues that are here as well that people might wish to question, if that's okay. So on that note, what I don't have, Madam Clerk, is the list of the deputants. I don't think I have it here somewhere, but anyway, now I have it. Okay. So on that note, we'll proceed to hear from the deputants. The first on the list, Raymond Shen. And just so people will be ready in the order that it's listed here, if you don't have a copy, next after that is Scott Dobson, David Jarofsky, Mike York. So those are the first four. Welcome, and you have 3 minutes to make your deputation.
Good morning. As a resident, I feel I've not been properly informed of the project is being rushed. I've tried my best to find accurate information, but I stand to be corrected. There have been corrections in that last presentation. I believe SmartTrack should clearly state that the service as we speak is 15 minutes. Council should not proceed with SmartTrack without knowing the decision on fare integration and knowing the full operating costs, which seem to have been revised just now. I will refer to the province-city agreement in principle, which, as I understand now, is also being revised under section 1.9, service concept. There's the clause, the province will inform the city of any resulting capital infrastructure or operating costs required. At this time, it is unknown what Metrolinx will charge the city for SmartTrack. Fare integration adds a second operating cost. I'm referring to report EX 28.6, Advancing Fare Integration. It estimates that the TTC will lose $11.5 million in fares because TTC no longer charges passengers transferring from GO. From Dr. Miller's June 2016 final report, Smart Ridership Analysis. This is table 4.1 on page 41. The Smart Track line is line 15 minutes. 74,000 TTC fare scenario is the integrated fare scenario where passengers transfer at no charge. 34,400 GO scenario is where passengers pay for both services. As well, my understanding up to now was that there is the unspecified charge for operations from Metrolinx. That's over here. There's an unspecified charge, plus with the fare integration, there's the additional loss to the TTC of $11.5 million. Referring to Dr. Miller's chart, you will see that at 5-minute service, there is 307,900 rides. It is clearly the people's choice. There's no conceptual plan, for the conceptual plan for 5-minute service, at line 24, at minute 24 of the November Executive Committee meeting, there's a plan detailing how that can be done. Councilors, you should not proceed with Smart Track without knowing the decision on fare integration and operating costs.
Thank you very much. Are there questions of the deputant? Well, thank you very much for your deputation. Much appreciated. Scott Dobson, Friends of West Toronto Railpath. Morning, sir.
Good morning.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, councillors, I am here representing the Friends of West Toronto Railpath. We are a community group dedicated to the care of and expansion of the West Toronto Railpath. Railpath is a multi-purpose trail that currently runs 2.2 kilometers along the east side of the Georgetown Rail Corridor from approximately DuPont south to Dundas. It is our mission to see Railpath completed, creating a 6-kilometer multi-purpose trail from Liberty Village all the way up to St. Clair. The existing section of Railpath is award-winning and beloved by the community. It's a connector, a meeting place, and an art-nature space. It's also a major feeder for the Bloor Go UPX station, helping make that station a true mobility hub. Railpath is human-powered with different users of different ages and abilities, and that's cool. Due to the hard work of many stakeholders, we will soon be seeing the expansion south from Dundas, 2.4 kilometers, ending at Abel Street, right next to the Liberty King Smart Track station. Since Railpath's original design, things have really changed in Liberty Village. The corridor is more crowded. In fact, Metrolinx didn't even exist when Railpath started. It's a much more lively but crowded place. It's a great place to work or live, but it's really hard to get in and out of. Liberty Village needs connections and transit. Connecting to Railpath is one of the solutions. The current plans for the Liberty Smart Track station feature a bridge, reflecting the original design that Railpath would continue south and connect with more communities. The bridge is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to do something really fantastic for transit connectivity. It would have been so easy to just build a Smart Track station, but a station with a bridge that connects to Railpath is so much more. We enthusiastically support the Liberty King Village Smart Track station and bridge to Liberty Village for these reasons. We support transit, period, especially when it has an intermodal component. By connecting Railpath over to Liberty Village, you are not only helping people get to a station to commute or to get across a divisive rail corridor, but you are connecting Liberty Village to all the communities north up towards St. Clair and vice versa back down to Liberty Village. Connecting Liberty Village to Railpath using the Smart Track station is an intermodal force multiplier. And as more connections to Railpath happen, and as new connections in Liberty Village develop, it's just going to get better and better. Best, all of the stakeholders that can make this happen agree that this is a great idea. Let's not miss this opportunity. Let's get people to this station. Let's take the strain off other transit and get people to leave their cars at home. Let's connect Liberty Village to all its friends. Let's make the West End intermodal in a big way. Let's complete West Toronto Rail Path. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. I had a question first from visiting Councillor Layton and then Deputy Mayor Barlow.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And the questions relate to slide 22 from the presentation, and this is specifically the King Liberty Station. There are right now two options for extension of the rail path going east of, let's call it Lisgar. I'm wondering if you have a preference to one of the two locations, or is it just what gets the job done?
I think that knowing what we know now, that the preferred route would be to use the Smart Track station to get to Liberty Village. That's where the people are. Does that answer your question?
No, sorry. I mean,
In terms of the other two potential options?
There are two hatched lines
Yeah.
to continue where the rail path would go and meet meet Wellington, where it was seen that
The
it
one
would
on
continue.
Sudbury?
Yeah, the one on Sudbury and the one just north of the tracks behind the townhomes.
The short answer, because that's a whole kettle of fish, is that Friends of Railpath does not support the route on Sudbury. That's not a multi-use rail path. That's an on-street bicycle path. In terms of going along the rail corridor, we originally wanted to be in the corridor, but it's now too crowded, so we can't do that. If we were forced to go in the back along the corridor, we'd have to work with the residents there, and we'd have to come up with a solution that makes everyone happy. You know, there's a lot of different competing interests there. I think it could work in a way that would make everyone happy. So I would say that would be the better of the two, but I would prefer going straight over to Liberty Village.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Layton. Deputy Mayor Barlow.
Thank you, Scott, for coming in and expressing your support for the bridge to connect to Liberty Village. But that is not the only opportunity that we actually have with this entire network, right? It is really important that through these negotiations between the city and Metrolinx, we actually connect what will be the guideway under the Davenport to the West Toronto Rail Path and to the north, which could create another 1.5 kilometers of public space, green space, and cycling infrastructure. Is that correct?
It's correct, and I mean, it's hard to get all this in 3 minutes, but when I said that the potential to make rail path and the connection to Liberty Village even bigger in terms of intermodal and more impactful, the potential to have the Barrie line multi-purpose trail connect to rail path and go up to St. Clair it's a massive increase in the catchment area that rail path would have.
So basically, your message here is really for us, as we're developing this transit infrastructure, to look beyond the transit and the other opportunities and ensure that we're not missing any opportunities to create this connection of trails and green spaces in the West End. Is that correct?
Correct. I mean, it's only human nature that we all tend to look at our own little silos. And often when people think about rail path and stuff like that, they look at just the part that's in front of their front door, and they don't see a connection to Liberty Village is really a connection to Henderson Brewing up at Junction Triangle, or it's a connection up to St. Clair, or a connection potentially to Earls Court Park on this Barrie line, or maybe even to the Green Line. What we're trying to do with this connection is expand what people call the network effect.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Barlow, any other questions of this deputy? Well, thank you very much, Mr. Dobson, for your time today. David Jarofsky, CEO, First Gulf. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Right, good morning, Mayor Tory and committee members. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to reinforce the benefits that Smart Track will deliver in terms of job creation, accessibility, and sustainable development in our city. My name is David Jarofsky. I'm the CEO of First Gulf Corporation, and I am here to speak in favor of Smart Track. You may recall that First Gulf is advancing a proposal for a major employment district called East Harbor on the former Unilever lands. The proposal converts underutilized and vacant industrial land into a district that supports over 50,000 jobs, as well as retail, entertainment, cultural uses, and amenities, as well as new parks and open spaces. Our proposal also incorporates flood protection measures consistent with the Portland's Flood Protection Project, which will unlock the development potential of several hundred acres of city land within the floodplain of the Lower Don River. Our vision for East Harbor is truly transformational, and it advances the city's policy priorities for job creation on employment lands. It's a prime example of public and private sectors working together to deliver shared priorities and long-term benefits for the city. East Harbor will play a significant role in meeting the demand for employment space through the next generation of the city's growth. The scale of the project has the potential to attract new jobs to the city, and our goal is to deliver best-in-class employment district that supports Toronto's global economic competitiveness. Higher order transit is critical, Mr. Mayor, for the viability of the East Harbor Employment District. Implementation of SmartTrack and the extension of the Broadview LRT are essential for East Harbor to attract new tenants and thousands of new jobs. East Harbor Station will also deliver vastly improved transit access for people who are already living and working in the surrounding area. And it will reach its full potential when additional planned transit projects such as Relief Line Subway and Waterfront East LRT are completed. It's my understanding that Metrolinx will be working towards delivery of East Harbor SmartTrack Station as early as 2021, and I'm happy to announce publicly today that First Gulf is working to deliver the first building to coincide with the completion in 2021 of the SmartTrack station and the transit hub. So we are doing the adaptive reuse of the existing soap factory building to deliver 500,000 feet of employment, jobs. And that building will house 4,000 employees, which is about 6 or 7 times the maximum number of employees who ever worked at the Unilever site, and that will be in our very first building. That's, yes, and the last thing I'd like to mention, Mr. Mayor, is that we believe that the IMIT program is also essential to the success of East Harbor, and we encourage City Council and this committee to reconsider the phasing out of the IMIT program and to extend it for a period of time in order to get the East Harbor Employment District established. Thank you.
Thanks. So there's a couple of questions may come your way, and we have Councillor Davis to start.
Thank you. Very clearly, there will be a need for significant new infrastructure. I'm going to try and move over so I can see. In the East Harbor and around the new station. And I presume that you will be making some kind of contribution to the public realm. And I'm wondering if you're in a position to share with us what that commitment might be.
Well,
What that commitment might be.
Sure, Councillor, I'm happy to speak to that. East Harbor will be making significant contributions. Firstly, an unprecedented contribution to the actual building of the East Harbor Transit Station. We're currently in negotiations with Metrolinx, and hopefully that will be completed over the next few weeks. We've been talking both to the city and to Metrolinx now for almost 2 years, and we are at the table and willing to inject private funds into the actual public transit station. In addition to that, we will be contributing significantly to public open spaces. A significant portion of the East Harbor lands will be for parks and open spaces. There will be road infrastructure, and there will be flood protection infrastructure that is necessary, and we will also be working on that with the city. The private sector investment here amounts to over $6 billion, and we are committed to moving forward with that and making significant contributions.
So the IMIT program is intended to support projects that would simply not be built, and it has to be demonstrated. Are you suggesting that you would not build it without it?
No, I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting that we all have a common interest, both the public and private sector, to seeing those jobs and that employment happen as quickly as possible. That supports the TIF, that supports the transit ridership, that gets the jobs into the City of Toronto, it attracts tenants. I'll give you one very quick example. The former Toronto Sun site on King Street East, we bought it a few years ago. Every other party bidding on those lands was going to build condos. Today, there is 1 million square feet of employment on that site, and today there are 7,000 people working on that former Toronto Sun site. And I can tell you, without the IMIT program, those jobs would not exist there. That employment node never would have happened. Coca-Cola would be in Brampton today, and they would have actually moved jobs out of the City of Toronto. So that incentive to help establish new areas such as East Harbor really works.
But you've just said it would not prevent you from proceeding here,
No, we're
not having the money.
We're committed to it, but I think it would
Okay.
happen much more slowly. And all of us, I think, have the interest to see this happen as quickly as possible because we want to see those jobs in the City of Toronto.
That was your last question, Councillor.
Thank you.
Thank you. I didn't have any other questions at the moment for this deputant. If not, I will thank you very much, Mr. Jofsky, for joining us today. Mike York from the Carpenters, I'm sorry, Councillor Ainsley, Mr. Jofsky, we did have a last-minute addition here.
Sorry, I didn't hear
By
you
popular
say
demand,
you're
no
bringing-
problem.
Sorry, Mayor Tory, I didn't hear you say you're
Not a
bringing
problem.
in committee.
Councillor Ainsley.
Thank you for coming in this morning. I just wanted to ask about, so the Unilever site, you're expecting that there'll be a smart track station there. And my understanding as well from other discussions we've had, your company's expecting a subway station through the downtown relief line as well to help development there?
It's on the city's plan, yes.
Okay, and so through that development, will you need both the subway station and the smart track station to get a proper public transportation mode built there or node built there?
So RER and Smart Track will provide significant amount of public transit, certainly enough public transit for us to begin construction and moving people into that site. So as I said at the beginning, in 2021, we expect to have the transit station in service, and we are putting an application for site plan approval for our first 500,000-foot office building, and it will go in later this year to coincide the completion of that building with the opening of the Smart Track station. But in the long run, when 500,000 feet goes to 5 million feet and 10 million feet, that subway will be critical and essential, but it's not going to slow us down from getting started.
Okay, and as the smart track station's built, you're going to scale up the development on your property?
We're scaling it up as fast as we possibly can. We want to get those lands into development. Many people in this room, including particularly the planning department, sees how committed we are to that. And we're talking to some of the most interesting employers in the world who have come to Toronto, who've indicated an interest in being at East Harbor, and I hope that we're making lots of announcements as soon as possible. That's what we aim to do.
All right, and is there an employment component to your project?
It's all
Or
employment.
sorry, not employment, residential? I need more coffee.
Yeah, no, sorry. Our application is only for employment-type uses. It's for 10 million square feet of employment and ancillary uses. It's not a residential application. That's not a permitted use. And we hope to have that to council and approved by June of this year.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor Tory.
Thanks, Councillor Ainsley. I had Councillor Thompson next, and then Councillor McMahon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Gorofsky. You will also there'll be a bus connection. It's a Broadview bus will be coming down as well to your site?
Yeah, so the Broadview streetcar Broadview will be extended down under the tracks south of Eastern and right down to Lakeshore and probably beyond. And that will allow the streetcar to eventually hook up to the Queens Quay LRT to form a complete network, which will also be another means of getting to Union Station as well as up to the Broadview Danforth.
So your site will be a significant hub then, right?
It will be a significant multimodal hub for LRT, for Smart Track, eventually for subway, but also we are going to be hooking directly into the city biking network along the lakeshore and up and down the Don Valley.
Now, how many jobs are you forecasting or projecting to be located at the site?
At least 50,000.
50,000 new jobs?
Yes.
Okay. And you mentioned, with respect to your question to Councillor Davis, that the IMET, the significant of that, benefit of that would be that it would help you to accelerate or advance your development. So walk me through the timeline process if the IMET was not available, because we're looking at basically disbanding that at this point in time, so it may not be available. So tell me how much longer it would take you then to advance your development.
I wish I could give you an exact answer on that, Councillor. We know this. We don't need IMET forever, but we do need IMET to get the node established for the first few years. And I think we can work with the city to slightly amend what's before exec committee today to create something that works for the city, that creates the kind of additional tax revenues that the city is looking for, but still allows us to get this project going in a much faster way, because we don't want to just build one building. We want to build millions of square feet. And we want
How many buildings will that be?
Pardon me?
How many buildings? You said you don't want to build just one building.
Well, our first building will be 500,000 feet out of 10 million square feet.
Okay.
The buildings will range in size, but 500,000, 800,000, a million square feet, these will be the typical.
And what are the types of jobs that you're looking at basically bringing into this location?
Well,
Jobs and...
Well, not unlike the million square feet that we've done on King Street East, they will include technology jobs. They'll probably include jobs in the financial services business. They'll include jobs related to the film, television, and creative industries. But we're certainly not saying it can only be one thing. We're obviously welcoming whoever wants to be there. But certainly the interest among technology companies is quite interesting.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor McMahon.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming down. Your proposal for this employment hub and beyond sounds amazing. And I just wonder, how important is it for you, for your project, for us to approve this today?
Well, I think it's absolutely critical. Public transit is at the heart and essence of the success of East Harbour. Without public transit, East Harbour won't exist. Without public transit, this will be an area where there's car dealerships and warehouses. We'll do it. It'll be a very sad loss of the potential of this site if we don't have public transit. Public transit will make this something not only to develop the East Harbour lands, but develop the entirety of the city's port lands and really open up as a catalyst to the entire area.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Jarofsky. I think that is all the questions we have, but we appreciate your time and your answers. And that brings us along to Mike York from the Carpenters Union. Welcome, Mr. York.
Welcome. Thank you.
3 minutes for your deputation, and then there will probably be some questions.
All right, so thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So I think folks around here are probably pretty familiar with the Carpenters Union, so I won't spend a lot of time on explaining our organization, but I will say that I'm extremely proud to be here on behalf of the 7,500 members of Local 27, and then also on the 25,000 members of the Carpenters around Ontario. So it gives me great pleasure to support the recommendations as well as support and promote the moving forward with the Smart Track program. Now, in particular, the implementation of a plan for the future of transit-focused development, a future based in increased housing and employment densification around transit cores. That's a key solution to solving Toronto's housing crisis. Now, as Toronto grows, it's crucial that we confront the transportation challenges of both today and tomorrow. The Smart Track program really does exactly that. Smart Track will provide for $1.2 billion of new infrastructure. That means 6 new stations and the integration of 8 existing stations, changing how Toronto and the GTA commutes. Through the integration of TTC and GO Transit systems, Smart Track will deliver an unprecedented range of options for commuters traveling to and from Toronto, all at the cost of a TTC fare. The 33 million trips which SmartTrack will serve annually play a crucial role in providing much-needed transit relief today while planning for an exciting future of transit-focused development. The potential for a total of 26 new rapid transit stops fully integrated with the TTC is a decisive and effective plan which the Carpenters greatly support. The implementation of SmartTrack will also generate $4.5 billion in economic and social benefit, with no long-term financial impact for the people of Toronto. In terms of the economic development, we've heard from the previous speaker about the crucial nature of this to a particular project moving ahead, but we see economic spin-offs, economic development across the city. And with regard to social benefit, I might also mention that our track record and our benchmark of success in terms of community benefits in partnering with developers and contractors along the Eglinton Crosstown, been highly successful, really opened the doors for many, many young people in terms of the construction industry and associated industries and benefits. So in conclusion, the 7,000 members of Local 27 are very proud to work in partnership with the City of Toronto and the Province of Ontario to construct a bright future for generations to come. And in partnership with our contractors, we certainly intend to bring it in on time and on budget. And I'd be pleased to take any questions at this point in time.
Sorry, Mr. York. Thank you very much for your deputation. And are there questions of Mr. York? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Ms. York, thank you very much for being here this morning. As you pointed out, we're well aware of your leadership and certainly the Carpenters Union and the work that's done with at-risk young people and so on. Can you help me to understand? There are those who say that SmartTrack is something that we should abandon and quite frankly not proceed with it. Can you give us your perspective? I know you've given us an overview here with respect to the report itself, but speak to those individuals who will come to this committee and say to us that we should disband this altogether. I know that there's some other types of modal of transit that perhaps people would like. But speak to us with respect to advancing this SmartTrack development, of course, keeping in mind that we actually want all types of transit across the city.
Well, certainly, speaking as someone that does spend a lot of time in their car, and I drive around the city a lot, and I have a lot of experience in terms of traffic. So any investment that we're making in mass transit, I find it hugely important. So our experience with the recent TTC opening up in Devon, now the Eglinton Crosstown. So the diversity of approaches and systems that we can bring to the table, to me, it's hugely important. And not just for the jobs and for the transit, but the economic development, the spin-offs that creates, as has been mentioned just by the previous speaker. I see that happening all across the city. So when I'm up on Shepherd, I see all kinds of investment on that TTC line, and then now into Vaughan area. So I find that, to me, it's just hugely important to have a real kind of a suite of options in terms of transit development.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Thompson. Any other questions of the deputy? Mr. York, thank you very much.
Very, very good. Thank you.
Appreciate it. The next four, just so they can be ready to come up. Todd Hoffley is next, Liberty Village Residents Association, Kiet Ngo, First Capital Realty, Hamish Wilson, and Jamal Myers. So those are the next four. Mr. Hoffley, welcome.
Hey, thank you very much for having me. My name is Todd Hoffley, and I'm president of the Liberty Village Residents Association. We are a collective of more than 18 condominiums with 6,000 condominium units and 9,000 people, and to our knowledge, we're now the largest residents association in North America. I'm here to speak about the King Liberty SmartTrack station and why this needs to happen. For more than 10 years, the residents of Liberty Village and its neighboring communities have been excessively patient with the lack of planning foresight that left us with a large deficit of necessary city infrastructure, while still filling the coffers of City Hall with hundreds of millions in land transfer taxes and property taxes. As I mentioned, we are now a community of approximately 9,000 people in 5 square blocks. But in the next 5 years, or by the time this station is hopefully complete, another approximately 5,000 people will be added, with 7 towers currently under construction and another 7 to 8 to begin within the next few years. If we expand our definition of Liberty Village by only half a kilometer in any direction, we then become 40,000 people in a tiny and amazing section of downtown West Toronto. Being right next door to Exhibition Place, bringing with it the CNE, the Royal Agricultural Winter Fair, a new hotel, the Bentway, the Champion TFC and the Champion Argos, the Raptors practice facility, go Raptors, the Toronto Wolf Pack. This brings a ton of amazing energy, a lot of opportunity, and business and visitors to our neck of the woods and the city. Add to that the more than 600 businesses and 10,000 employees that currently call Liberty Village home. The incredible neighborhoods of Parkdale and West Queen West, plus the revitalized Ontario Place, and you have a dynamite Western hub that is at the forefront of community building, urban living, and innovation. We love the city we live in. We love the city we're a part of, and we accept the realities of choosing to live downtown. But we need to be able to move, and this station, along with other improvements already underway, will finally allow us to do that. It will connect Liberty Village to West Queen West via a pedestrian cycling bridge, and I believe has the potential to create a phenomenal experience above the tracks that would, albeit on a much smaller scale, be akin to New York's High Line. It will allow the employment lands of Liberty Village to rapidly expand and create job growth while also protecting the value of the community. But it's important to note that this link doesn't just serve the residents and surrounding communities and businesses of Liberty Village. It will also serve everyone along this rail corridor. With fewer and fewer millennials and eventually their children driving or even getting a driver's license, pedestrian cycling and rail infrastructure will increasingly become the norm. It will be how they get to the CNE and downtown Toronto from Weston, Rexdale, Brampton, and beyond, allowing them to enjoy the city while leaving the roads more free for those who must use cars. We highly recommend that the Executive Committee pass this on to Council unanimously, and thank you and all city staff for the tremendous work that has gone into developing this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hoffley. Are there questions of the deputy? Councilor Layton.
Yep, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. Originally, when we were looking at maps for a station in Liberty Village, it was quite a bit further east towards the residential sort of core of Liberty Village. Yep. That has since changed, and I think there's been a number of very reasonable engineering reasons why it has changed. Has the position of, or does the Residents Association have a position that they're understanding of these changes and want us to proceed with the location and the current location?
Absolutely. The community knows that this is not ideal. This is not preferred. We would have preferred it south of King Street and further east of the rail overpass along King Street, because it would have been much more central to us. But we understand that there are engineering things. We understand that we can't always get exactly what we want, but that this is important enough for us and, like I said, all of the surrounding communities and the far extended communities, that this is a compromise that we're absolutely willing to have.
That perhaps we cannot even change the laws of physics.
Well, as much as we would like to, yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councilor Layton. Other questions of this deputy? Thank you very much for your time today. I appreciate it very much. Kiet Nago, Director, First Capital Realty.
Morning.
Thank you for coming today, and you have 3 minutes, and then there may be some questions.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Mr. Mayor and Executive Committee. My name is Keith Ngo, and I'm the Director of Development at First Capital. First Capital strongly supports the Smart Track program overall, and especially the design of the King Liberty Station. As owners of the property immediately adjacent, First Capital is anxious to work with the city to provide the best connections possible between the station and surrounding communities. We paid close attention while city planners and Metrolinx addressed the engineering challenges associated with locating a station into a massive rail corridor. We've been very impressed by the ingenuity they have exercised to maximize the benefits this station can bring. Called the King High Line, this mixed-use development will bring new retailers to King Street West and over 500 rental apartments. We started construction 3 years ago and hope to have it completed and occupied in 2018. We're constructing a multi-use path that will connect this development over the King Street Bridge and into Liberty Village. To make this path a reality, we have been working with Metrolinx to determine its exact dimensions while they plan future electrification infrastructure and determine the space requirements for new tracks to accommodate Smart Track. We have learned how complicated it is to plan and engineer this critically important infrastructure. We have also committed to upgrade and re-engineer the bridge over King Street as part of our agreement with Metrolinx. Although this multi-use path was intended for our development, it can serve a much higher and significant purpose when considered in context with the proposed station and the extension of the West Toronto Rail Path. The station design proposes to provide access to the platforms below by way of a bridge that could easily connect our multi-use trail to the extension of the West Toronto Rail Path. Not only will transit riders from communities on both sides of the rail corridor have convenient access to higher order transit, this would also provide pedestrian and cycling trail that links all communities from north of DuPont to Liberty Village. Since First Capital moved its head office into Liberty Village 10 years ago, we have seen this part of the city evolve into a dynamic mixed-use community. The King Liberty Smart Track Station will be a huge boost to transit riders in the area and will link several communities to other parts of the city and GTA. In summary, First Capital is very excited about the new connections this station will make for Liberty Village and the surrounding neighborhoods, and we look forward to working with you to make it a reality. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your deputation. And are there questions? Hearing none, well, thank you very much for your time. Much appreciated. Hamish Wilson.
Good morning. Thanks for being here. In some ways, this is good, and primarily I think it's because Metrolinx is involved and GO, because they've done a pretty good job over time of increasing the services to the center of the city. And yet I'm also worried that we're actually rushing ahead a lot here. I know there's pressure, and I'd refer to the climate pressure as well, but we're not doing the simple, obvious things for climate, in my view. And to have the billions go again on larger things that perhaps aren't going to, like the fares do matter, and I'm not sure that they're really as pegged down as they need to be. As to how much it'll cost. Also the service levels. Mr. Steve Monroe has a good blog, if you haven't followed it, stevemonroe.ca. He had a series of tweets as well on all of this, and he's able to get into the details a lot more than I can. In a series of tweets on, what was it, April 10th, I think, he was saying, city staff at, quote, new stations public meetings have used the more frequent service design in which all trains stop at all stations. It doesn't seem to be that way. Number 7, the city's estimates of capacity, ridership, and development stimulus for the Smart Track rest on the original plan where all trains would serve all stations. So this is explicit in the city report. Number 8, Metrolinx cannot provide the stated level of service without reverting to the all-local model, but this would increase travel times for riders from the outer reaches of their network. So what we're tending to do here is make the GO service into more of a local service, especially as you get into the core, and I don't think that's good, because the 905 riders, they want to have the quick trips in, and just because we haven't actually provided the needed service, especially on the south end of things, as some of you might know, I've been fussing about trying to improve the TTC transit from Queensway, Parkdale, through Liberty Village into the core for a decade and a half, and we've really been abject failures on that. The GO riders may not want to have their time slowed down. There's a time cost there, and there's an election coming up, so and we have incredible debt on the provincial level, so things may change after June 7th. Forwards was backwards, by the way. So instead of degrading the GO service, why can't we think of actually improving the TTC to be more of a sub-regional service? That'd be a nice thing to have happen. And in the Liberty Village area and everything, if we actually dug in a TTC tunnel under any new track, starting at Queen and near Dufferin area. So we actually have the option of having a faster TTC-based express route into the core using Front Street for transit. We need to start having new routes, new flexibilities, because even with the GO RER, it's still going to be a brittle system. Something happens at Union Station, something happens on the tracks, there's going to be a problem. We could do a loop, reversible transitway. Why not? That would be value, because for the most part, I think what we're doing here, we're siphoning off money from the core to help support suburban riders. And we need a divorce from the suburban, and you guys tend to be suburban interests. I'm sorry, we've got to get change.
And on that note,
this is quite good.
I will thank you, Mr. Wilson, and see if there are any questions for you. Hearing none, I thank you very much. Jamal Myers, Scarborough Transit Action.
Could we switch?
Pardon me?
Sorry. Would we be able to switch places for two people on the list that are already on the list?
Well, I mean, I have it here in an order. It doesn't really matter to me. The next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 are all from Scarborough Transit Action. What we often do is have organizations like that actually combine themselves into one and save time. But if you want to come in a different order, if it convenience to somebody, we're not anxious to cause inconvenience, so we can do what you wish. I mean, I just want everybody to agree on it, that's all, so I'm not faced with some arguing factions. I have Mr. Myers next on the list, and could have anybody that wants to come up if you're all agreed. The greatest thing you could do would be to actually say, well, fine, if there's 6 of you, you could have the message in the time allocated for 3, but that's fine. You're welcome to take all 6 times if you want. Mr. Myers, are you next, or?
I'm Anil Lewis.
Pardon me?
I'm Anil Lewis, number 12.
Oh, there you are, Anil Lewis. Okay, well, if everybody agrees you should be next, then you're next.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, respected Mayor and committee members. My name is Anil Lewis, and I live by the Lawrence RT station. I'm part of Ward 37. I take the SRT to Kennedy. Your plan to replace the SRT with one Lawrence East station or Smart Track station and a one subway stop plan is a discussion point whenever our community meets, and the voice is only getting stronger. The SRT will not help this plan to replace the SRT will not help our community, and here's why. Instead of 5 stations from which to access our TTC network, I will have only one Scarborough Town Center station. Lawrence, Midland, McCowan will all be eliminated and replaced with a Go Smart Track station at Lawrence East. Going to Town Center and other places will no longer be convenient. When traveling on the Smart Track, I'll have to pay more. Why would I want to do this when I can get to Kennedy, Ellesmere, Midland, McCowan, and STC on a TTC fare now? While this might not affect me more, people riding the 54 Lawrence East bus will no longer have the convenient access to the Lawrence East Smart Track station. People will have to get off the Lawrence East overpass and walk down several flights of stairs or take an elevator to get there, which will get worse during winter, especially during ice storms. That is not more convenient, it is much less convenient. I'll have to wait longer. Instead of catching an RT every 4 minutes, I must now wait 6 to 10 minutes for a local service via Smart Track. Or to save money, take the 43 TTC bus to Kennedy and even wait more. I'll be spending more time on buses along with other 16,000 existing riders who use the 4 RT stations that will close. We will have to transfer to another bus or go down to Kennedy Station to get to Scarborough Town Center. How does that reduce my travel time? Note, when there are constructions on road, travel time is always high. Example, the construction right now at Kennedy and Eglinton. This only increases pollution and will not help when our province is committed to reducing our carbon footprint. I shouldn't have to wait 10 years while you replace the Scarborough RT with a one-stop subway and one Smart Track station. We should be replacing the SRT with a 7-stop Scarborough LRT or equivalent. Why are we spending up to $3.56 billion for a one-stop subway and a $155 million Smart Track station when we could replace the SRT with a 7-stop LRT for a lot less? Decision to replace infrastructure like this must be made on strong data and not plans drawn on a napkin, at least as reported by Toronto Star. In IT consulting, where I come from, when we create services, we make use of existing infrastructure. You're ignoring the needs of transit riders in Lawrence RT, a priority neighborhood where I live. With the money for a one-stop subway and a Lawrence Smart Track station, we could be building a lot more, bringing a rail rapid transit network to 7 priority networks.
I'll have to ask you to conclude on that note. Your time is up.
Yeah, okay. I think I'm good.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there questions of the Deputy, Councillor Thompson?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Lewis. So, Mr. Lewis, you are aware that the SRT is coming to its useful end?
Well, as per the TTC folks, that is not their opinion. I understand they are, if it comes to an end, the solution proposed is not a recommended solution.
So sorry, you just said the TTC has stated that the SRT is not.
Well,
coming
it's
to an
not
end?
official, at least for some of the people who talk to us or have been talking to us.
I'm sorry, who's been talking to you?
These are people who work in TTC, and they have been.
But who are they?
There have been people who are drivers, construction.
The drivers?
Yes.
Ah, okay, thank you. I have no.
Other questions of the deputy, Councilor Ainsley?
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. So you live next to the Lawrence
Yes.
SRT? So when we eliminate that SRT station, to get downtown, you would go take the bus to the Kennedy subway station or
Yes.
Smart Track?
Yes, or Smart Track, which is a lot inconvenient because sometimes we get called on meetings, and the SRT right now is very convenient. I can just hop off to that RT station and get to Kennedy, which is much faster and convenient while I have to go to downtown or other places.
Okay, and how long would the trip, would you like walk to so if you took the Smart Track station, which we're looking at building at Lawrence, would you walk to it, or is that a bus trip for you?
For me, for the folks living besides the RT station, it would be a walk. I'm assuming the underpass would still be available, but we will still be walking.
Okay, and would you be willing to, so in the budget, the provincial government just forward, they talked about a uniform charge if you had a Presto card would be $3. Would that be a suitable fare for you for a Smart Track station?
Well, I'm assuming it's based on elections, right? Yeah, sure. If the TTC, if the fare is the same, why not, right? But again, this is all based on promises from party members.
Yeah. But ultimately, you would prefer an LRT system from Kennedy to replace the SRT with an LRT system is what you're
Yes.
advocating for?
Yes, and the reason is we build on infrastructure that is already available. I understand the SRT is nearing its way, it's no longer going to be feasible, but the stations do exist. Why throw away existing infrastructure?
Okay, all right, thank you. Thank you, Mayor Tory.
Thanks, Councilor Ainsley. Other questions of the deputy? I just had one, sir, if I might. Just to be clear, you said, if I'm not mistaken, that you would walk to the new Lawrence East Smart Track station. Is that correct?
I walk less now, yes.
No, but you
Yes,
would
yes,
walk
I do
there.
Yes, I do walk.
And then you are aware, notwithstanding you said about elections, the government of Ontario has announced this will be implemented as a matter of policy, and they're in the process of now implementing it for January the 1st. So it's not an election promise as much as it's a decision that's been taken and announced in the budget that will be implemented on January the 1st. The same fare.
Well, those are promises. What if the new government comes, the new party comes and just reneges back on that? Similar to what was done earlier when an LRT was promised and was cancelled for a one-stop subway station.
But you will acknowledge that in the event you walk to the Lawrence East Smart Track station and get on, and this commitment is implemented as they're underway doing now, that it will cost no more, because you implied that there'd be an additional cost to going on Smart Track versus going on the TTC, which you would acknowledge would not be the case if that commitment is met.
Yes, for me, I can walk, but there are other communities who live besides it. What they will have to do is now they will have to use an elevator to come and access that station. Right now, buses come to the SRT station, and people just catch the trains out there. But once this is replaced by a Smart Track, they will have to use the elevator and come down, which is not at all accessible. For now, yes, for me and our community that lives nearby, but then there are other condos and other buildings that live beside that station.
Thank you very much, sir. Much appreciated. Next, now we've gone out of order here. We just reverting back to the order now? Okay, well, I'll go back to the order. It's Alan McCartney, Scarborough Transit Action. Welcome, sir. You have 3 minutes.
Good morning, people. I am Alan McCartney of Ward 26, Don Valley West, presided by Councilor John Burnside. I extend my appreciation to the Executive Committee for the opportunity to speak today. My view of Smart Track, as I perceive Smart Track, is a commuter system which brings people into Toronto to access the downtown core from areas outside of the boundaries of Toronto. it has been said and understood that building rail systems provides opportunity or provides incentives for redevelopment. I think most Torontonians see that these rail corridors are really an incentive for rapid redevelopment for intensification. Over the last, I would say, approximately 5 years, Torontonians are seeing a significant amount of redevelopment in various areas of the city without an essential increase in services to provide the movement of people throughout all areas of Toronto. We shouldn't just focus on Scarborough, we should focus on all areas within Toronto and within Scarborough herself. Right now, we have essentially one north-south line. I perceive the Toronto portion of Smart Track as an east-west route. The Bloor-Danforth line is an east-west route. The upcoming Eglinton Crosstown is an east-west route. These routes will tend to put a lot of people onto what I perceive as the only one north-south route. When the plan, as I understand it, when Smart Track is fully implemented, the Scarborough RT will be decommissioned and to be replaced with the Scarborough Extension One Stop, which seems to be in the area of $5 billion. That's a lot of money, and if you do recall, there was provincial funding put aside for the 7-stop LRT in the first place, which has been cast aside. I do not consider the City of Toronto as having what I consider to be a network. We have to consider all areas within the city to move all people in all areas of the city, not just, let's say, bring people from, let's say, Unionville or somewhere else and dump them into downtown. The map that I have put up here is an example of what I consider a network. It is the Munich U-Bahn and S-Bahn systems. I have used it, and after 2 weeks, I was spoiled for essential transit. So
I'll have to ask you to conclude on that note. Just one more comment, if you wish, sir.
That's basically it. So I sincerely appreciate the opportunity afforded by the committee for my time here.
Thank you very much, Mr. McCartney. Are there questions of the deputant? If there's no one else, I have just a couple. Oh, Councilor Ainsley, you go ahead.
Thank you for coming in this morning. So the diagram there, so in Scarborough where we're looking at a one-stop subway extension, you would prefer the original plan, or your group, that was the LRT from Kennedy North to the Scarborough Town Centre?
Yes, the original one, which was initially fully funded by the provincial government, was $1.8 billion, I seem to recall. That's what I'm thinking about, which was basically, for lack of a better word, which was basically terminated or discarded by the previous administration under the late Rob Ford. And the diagram that I'm showing up there is a network, which I consider that a network. It provides various options. It serves thousands of points for different times of the day, and it has redundancy. So the more redundancy you have, then we can move toward the elimination of shuttle buses, which to me in the 21st century shouldn't even exist. If you do have an issue with a line in an example network like that, the transit riders will be able to find an alternative way to move around the city, the entire city, without using shuttle buses. I have used that system, and there was one time I couldn't get around, but I did find another way to get to a particular location in Munich.
Okay, and as what we're discussing here today is the advancing Smart Track, and one of the things we're looking at doing is an integrated transit system that'll bring people into the city and off our roads. You'd agree that Smart Track would be part of that integrated system?
It could be as long as we don't remove the existing stations that we do have. For example, on the Scarborough RT system. If you're going to remove stations, then you're really to my way of thinking, you're taking a step backwards. So I've always supported the concept that if you, on an annual basis, if you go throughout the city, and I mean throughout the city, and Scarborough is a particular serious problem, I would say that you add a little bit at a time throughout all areas of the city, as opposed to, for example, building a 19-kilometer, I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, as opposed to building a 19-kilometer Eglinton Crosstown at one shot, rather than address more areas of the city, even though you may be adding a shorter line.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thank you, Mayor Tory.
Thank you, Councilor Ainsley. I had Councilor Burnside.
Thank you. Hi, Alan.
Hi, John.
Nice to see you. I just have one question. It was actually just in response, when you were just responding to Councilor Ainsley, and you said your concern is if we're taking out stops.
Okay.
Right? You just mentioned that you have no problem with Smart Track, but you don't want to see RT stops or any stops removed, correct?
No, if there's something that is already there, I don't think you should just remove it in favor of, let's say, the one-stop Scarborough extension. You should enhance what you've already got, even if you have to rebuild something.
Okay, so, well, thank you for reminding me that the Scarborough, and I know my councillor colleague did too, reminded me that it's one stop. But apart from that, would you agree that the purpose of, I'll say, rail for sure, heavy rail and light rail, is to move people quickly?
People, yes.
Right, okay. So are more stops necessarily better? And I know you would probably, and I'll expand on that. I know you've probably taken the Danforth line or the Yonge line when you stop at Chester Station and 3 or 4 people get on or off, or Summerhill Station or Rosedale Station. Would you agree that sometimes more stops isn't necessarily better because it slows the majority of people moving down for a very few people that may or may not be getting off?
The my thought on something like that is if you had several lines, you may not need to worry about that, if I understand your question correctly. To my way of thinking, the more points that you have, the better it is. And if you have right now, I think I see where you're coming from. Right now, with a single east-west line, for example, the Bloor Danforth line, when you get on one end of that, you're stopping. This one line is serving both ends of the city, where everybody, so to speak, has to get on this single east-west line to access points west, for example. Let's see if you're going from somewhere in Scarborough to somewhere in Etobicoke, is that everybody has to get on that to access points in the west part of the city and then transfer to buses.
Right, and I guess what I'm saying is, short of the politics of all of this, wouldn't the prudent thing to do, especially when you're looking at trains or LRTs that carry a large number of people, to have those as nodes and then have service coming into those nodes? My concern is when you have so many stops, it actually slows people down. It becomes a milk run. In fact, we heard that with the Go line, that was one of the concerns at one point, that if there are too many stops, people will actually not use it because it ceases to become a fast way to travel.
But I'm not so sure I really agree with that concept. Okay. But if you have more stops to serve more people at different times of the day, you do help climate change by getting people out of their cars and into a light rail system. And if you do that, then you can address the problem of congestion.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Councilor Burnside. Other questions? I have a couple for you, if I might, sir. Oh, sorry, Councilor Thompson, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. McCartney. So you're from Ward 26, sir?
Yes.
Okay. Were you aware that approximately 9-10 years ago, the TTC had done a lot of work with respect to looking at what the possible transit option would be with respect to the replacement of the Scarborough SRT. Were you aware of that?
No, probably not.
You were not aware of that?
No, because even though I don't live in Scarborough, I look at myself as traveling anywhere within the boundaries of Toronto.
Okay, so you were not aware of that?
No.
All right, and so if you were aware that the TTC was recommending the replacement of the SRT, irrespective of whatever options are going to be, would you be now saying that the SRT should not be replaced? Because that's what I'm hearing you saying.
I'm saying that you don't want to downgrade from what you already have to fewer stops. And with something like the Scarborough subway extension is running over a distance of 6 to 7 kilometers,
right,
which is the same distance from from the Davisville run to, I believe, Union Station. It's the same distance, so it's compared to, let's say, 10 or 12 stops or so.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Other questions? I just have a couple for you, if I might, sir. First of all, I trust that when you look at this map, this is Bonn, is it? The map you've got up here?
Yes, I'm using this, that is Munich.
Munich, okay.
I'm using that as an example.
I don't know this, but you've been there and you've used it. I trust you would acknowledge that some of this, maybe even quite a bit of it, would be surface rail, not all subways, and different modes of transit that are shown on that network you've got up there, is that correct?
That's S-Bahn and U-Bahn, that's underground.
And are you aware of the fact, I'm sure you are, that SmartTrack is part of a network transit plan that's been developed and approved by the City Council this term, and it consists of a variety of projects, including the Scarborough Bloor-Danforth subway extension, including SmartTrack, and including, for example, the LRT that goes to the U of T Scarborough campus. You'd acknowledge that this is part of a network transit plan, and indeed, across the rest of the city, other lines, including waterfront transit, the relief line, and a whole host of things that'll make our map look a little bit more like this. You'd acknowledge that, would you?
I do not consider what we have, I consider a network, because there isn't a redundancy necessary. On the example I'm showing here, I consider that a network because you have redundancy and several options.
Well, I'm going to get to that, but you will acknowledge that there is a network transit plan, because when you talk about what you think of our current plan, I would tend to agree with you, which is why we put such an effort into getting approved a network transit plan that consists of all those lines I mentioned. Waterfront transit, SmartTrack, Scarborough LRT, Eglinton East, Eglinton West LRT, and so on. You'd acknowledge there is a network transit plan that has been approved by the City Council to make our map look more like this.
I don't consider it a network because they're not all interconnected by rail. They're interconnected by streetcars and buses.
Okay, well, we could debate that. Could I, just on another point that you made about north-south and redundancy, I can't unfortunately put this up, but in the report that you're here speaking to, you'll acknowledge when you look at that the SmartTrack, which is right there, as you can probably see that from here, it essentially is, you'd acknowledge, a good part of it, a north-south route that actually is going to be established with stops inside the City of Toronto to give people an option other than the Yonge Street subway. You'd acknowledge that, wouldn't you? I do not
consider SmartTrack. This council should be addressing transit for the citizens of Toronto as opposed to bringing people from outside the boundaries of Toronto. I don't agree with that.
Respectfully, let's just talk about the part that goes from Finch and Kennedy to Agincourt to Lawrence and Kennedy to the Scarborough station to Danforth. That is a north-south route that travels right down the north-south spine of Scarborough. That's what I'm showing you, this map. It is to be operated on the same basis, meaning that the same fare will apply to get onto that as going across to the Yonge Street subway. It's the map is right there. That's what SmartTrack is.
But also the SmartTrack includes areas outside the boundaries of Toronto, correct?
Well,
that's the part I disagree with.
Let's talk about that for a minute. Do you think it might be helpful to some people who live in Scarborough to be able to take a train from their home in Scarborough to go to work in Markham, for example, or for people in Markham to come to work in Scarborough? Because part of SmartTrack indeed does go beyond the boundaries of 416, though most of it is actually inside the City of Toronto. You'd acknowledge that's what this map shows. Most of SmartTrack is inside.
I don't see enough progressive advances in transit, let's say, to address all areas, all geographical areas in Scarborough, for example.
All right.
And the SmartTrack is restricted.
Were you aware of the fact that, sorry, I'm over time.
Okay.
Any other questions of the deputy? All right, well, thank you very much, sir. Have next Miss Brenda Thompson, Scarborough Transit Action. Good morning.
Good morning, Mayor Tory and members of the executive. I think the reason why there are so many people for Scarborough Transit Action is because I misunderstood the registration process. However, next time there'll be individuals, not listed as members of our group. And I just wanted to start off by saying that our organization, we are not against Smart Track. We support Smart Track, but we feel that the need to secure a TTC fare and 5-minute service, and also delivering and operating and maintaining it publicly, are very important things, conditions that need to be met before we go ahead with this project. And that's a more general sort of comment on Smart Track. More specifically, we have concerns about the Lawrence East Smart Track station. We did a survey of riders on this at the Lawrence Smart Track station. I don't know if you can see this. Okay, so we asked people how often do they use that station, and 72% said they used it daily 5 times or more. We asked them where they were going. Where are you usually traveling to and from the station? We asked 200 people, by the way. And 41% were going downtown. Above that number, 50% were going elsewhere in Scarborough. So it's important that we know that, because more people are trying to get somewhere else in Scarborough. We also asked people if they knew that when the mayor's plan for a one-stop subway from Kennedy Station to Scarborough Centre is finished, Lawrence East Station and the rest of the SRT will close. We also asked them if they knew there would be a Lawrence East Smart Track station there. And around the same percentage, 83%, didn't realize that. So with that in mind, we asked them, do you support the mayor's plan for the subway and the Lawrence East Smart Track station? Or would you prefer to return to the original 7-stop LRT plan? And as you can see, 93% wanted to go back to the 7-stop LRT. We have raised these concerns at all the public consultation meetings in Scarborough. We don't see any record of those concerns in the reports that the city has produced on this project. We see concerns about parking and about noise, but we don't see any of the concerns that people have about the Lawrence East Smart Track station. So if I still have,
We're just done now, so maybe there'll be a question, but thank you.
Thank you.
Are there questions of this deputy? Councilor Ainsley?
Good morning, Brenda. So,
morning.
sorry, you said that you raised concerns at the public meetings and you didn't see them incorporated into any of the reports?
Certainly not the specific concerns we had about the Lawrence East Smart Track station and how it would reduce access for people, and how people would not want to walk down several flights of stairs from the Lawrence 54 bus. And they don't want to wait 15 minutes when they can wait only 4 minutes right now, and they don't want to have to pay more, so.
Okay, but my understanding, so the Smart Track station, for example, at Lawrence is going to be fully AODA compatible when it's built. You're just saying that compared to the SRT station at Lawrence, where people would go right into it on a bus, and the trains I think they run every 4 to 5 minutes.
Yes.
So they would consider that much more accessible and have an LRT route through there than going to Smart Track.
Yeah, they definitely want to keep the stations, and they're excited about the fact that they could have 2 more stations, and that the buses would still come into Lawrence East Station and let them off, and they could just get on the rapid transit, as opposed to having to climb downstairs from an overpass.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Tory.
Thanks, Councilor Ainsley. Any other questions of the deputy? All right, Ms. Thompson, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Then we have Leonie Thelwell, Scarborough Transit Action. Good morning.
Morning, Mr. Mayor.
You have 3 minutes, and we thank you for coming.
My role today is just to present a letter from one of our Scarborough residents that cannot be here today. All right? And I think maybe I would be able to save you some minutes from used up by the others. Okay. Dear councillors, my name is Brian Chung, and I'm a resident on Ellesmere between Birchmount and Kennedy, the Dorset Park neighborhood in Scarborough. Public transit is my major method of travel in the city and has been for a couple of decades now, since I first studied at the University of Toronto. I use the TTC to get to work, meet with friends, attend events, access inner city transport, and my main access point is the Ellesmere RT station. A comprehensive LRT network would help me significantly more than a one-stop subway and a Lawrence East Go Smart Track station. If you would build the Scarborough and Eglinton East LRT now, I would be able to travel within Scarborough for my various appointments and errands much more quickly and easily than with the current bus system. As it is, and with current proposed plans for the SSE, I tend to route my business downtown or midtown rather than within Scarborough because it is easier, despite being geographically farther, and LRT network would increase the accessibility and encourage development in my greater neighborhood and communities to the east of me. Please don't make me wait 10 years for a subway extension that will eliminate 4 RT stations and put more transit riders on buses. Use the $3.56 billion allocated for the one-stop subway to build a 24-stop LRT network now.
Okay.
Thank you, and best regards, Brian Chung.
Thank you very much, ma'am, and right on time, too. Well done. So we have some questions from Councillor Thompson for you, if you might.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Hi. You probably can't see me that well, but I hope you can hear my voice. I just wanted to, just a bit of clarification. You said the author of the letter resides between Birchmount Road and, was it Kennedy on Ellesmere?
It says Ellesmere.
Yes, between
Birchmount.
Birchmount and Ellesmere?
Ellesmere, yes.
Right, and you...
And that area, he says, is called
Dorset, yes. So you're suggesting, the author is saying that they then go to the Midland and Lawrence station to take the TTC? Is that what it says?
No, he goes to the Ellesmere.
The Ellesmere station?
Yeah.
I see, okay. Well, that's what I wanted to clarify. I didn't hear
Goes to
you
the
clearly.
Ellesmere
Yes, okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Thompson. Any other questions of the deputy? Thank you very much, ma'am. Much appreciated. And then next was Anil Lewis, who we heard from already, and so that brings us to the last deputant, Cheryl Luz Thurav, Scarborough Transit Action.
Neil had to go, so we switched places.
No, but Anil, oh, I'm sorry. What is your name then?
Jamal Myers.
Oh, you're quite right. Yes, oh, indeed. Thank you, Mr. Myers. Okay.
Thank you.
You're up.
Good morning. I'm a Scarborough resident and member of Scarborough Transit Action. I'm here today to urge the Executive Committee to return to the original 7-stop LRT route and not pursue Smart Track at Lawrence East and cancel the $4 billion one-stop subway. Simply put, closing Lawrence East, Ellesmere, and Midland RT stations and replacing them with one GO SmartTrack station is inadequate to meet the needs of Scarborough residents. In an August 2017 survey of over 200 users of Lawrence East Station, over 85% of respondents did not know it was closing. Shockingly, on a canvassing of the station 7 months later, on April 7th, only one person I spoke to knew that the station was closing, and she opposed the idea. Whether or not riders knew the station was closing, respondents universally opposed SmartTrack. They worried their home values would drop. Bus riders worried about having to pay an additional GO fare on top of their TTC fare, and they were confused as to why SmartTrack was a good value for money, as 50% of them primarily used Lawrence East to travel within and around Scarborough. On top of this, residents worried about how they would access Lawrence East, as the 54 bus would offload passengers on an overpass and have them walk down multiple flights of stairs or take an elevator to enter the SmartTrack station. Such a design is extremely unfair to rush hour commuters, seniors, the disabled, and those with mobility issues. It also opens the city up to expensive personal injury lawsuits. Residents overwhelmingly support keeping the existing SRT route and extending it by 2 stops to Centennial Progress. As a taxpayer and transit user, I support this too. Not only does this offer the best value of money, but it respects my time. My time matters. I urge the Executive Committee to listen to Scarborough residents. We want an integrated 24-stop LRT seamless network that connects us to jobs, closes the transit gaps in Scarborough, and connects us to the rest of Toronto. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Myers. Questions of the deputy? Councilor Ainsley.
Thank you. Thank you for coming in this morning. One of the concerns that they often hear in my area with the Lawrence Avenue station, people trying to get downtown, but in students that have to get to Centennial College saying that now their trip to the college, for example, is getting harder because they're now they have to take buses from Lawrence. They have to find a way to get north or up Markham Road, Orton Park, Brimley, McCowan, whereas now, if there's an LRT station, they would get it at Lawrence, they would go directly into the campus. So now their trips actually can be made harder and much more longer and difficult.
Yes, that's correct. And what we heard from a lot of people was that they were upset, especially people who couldn't afford to use the Lawrence SmartTrack GO station, that they would have to be forced to take an additional bus to either Kennedy or Scarborough Town Centre, which would increase their commute times. So it really doesn't make sense for the residents of Scarborough, and I just want to be clear, we're not opposed to SmartTrack for the rest of the city. We heard from the gentleman from Liberty Village, and if that's what Liberty Village wants, that's fine. But for Scarborough, a $4 billion one-stop subway and a Lawrence East SmartTrack station just doesn't make sense for the majority of residents. It's just not what we need. We're taking away 4 RT stops and replacing them with 1 SmartTrack and 1 subway stop. We already have the lowest number of stops in the city. We have the second highest population at 600,000 people, and it doesn't make sense to take away the few stations that we have. We should build on the infrastructure that's already there.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor Tory.
Thanks, Councilor Ainsley. Are there other people? Councilor Thompson, did you have a? No. Okay. I'll just have one question for you. You would acknowledge when you talk about 4 going to 2 that you're not including the, I think it's 11 stops that are on the LRT, the Scarborough East, Eglinton East LRT, that's also part of the Scarborough Network Transit Plan. When you talk about the number of stops in Scarborough, there's I think 11 or maybe more than 11 on that LRT that goes to the U of T campus.
Yes, so we support that. What we urge the council to do is to make that the priority rather than the Scarborough subway stop. If you connected U of T Scarborough and brought it all the way up to Malvern, that would make a difference in thousands of people's lives. It doesn't make sense to build a $4 billion one-stop subway to a shopping mall.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Then that does bring us to Cheryl Luz Thurab, Scarborough Network Transit.
She's not.
She's gone? Okay. I beg your pardon? I hear people talking.
I tried to cancel her on the list.
Oh, that's okay. No problem. Oh,
Well, I just wanted to,
no, are you registered to make a deputation, ma'am?
no, so I am Cheryl Lewis Thoreau.
Oh, you are?
And,
Oh, very
I
nice.
just wanted to say that.
Thought you weren't here.
I am here, but
You
I
are here.
wanted to say that we've heard from a number of people from Scarborough Transit Action. I have decided not to speak today, but thank you very much for the opportunity and the space to have this conversation.
Thank you very much, and we appreciate your being here and that you're willing not to speak. I guess they've spoken for you, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us, Councillor Davis, did you you were wanting to ask questions, yes. That brings us to questions of, when I say questions of staff, it'll be questions on both the presentation and to staff generally. So we'll commence with that now, and I presume that Councillor Davis had her hand up, and so she's most welcome to start.
Thank you. I want to ask about delegated authority. There are a number of places in this report where we're delegating authority for all of the real estate transactions, some surplus to expropriation, disposal of lands. We're also delegating to the deputy city manager for deciding what is fair and reasonable in the costs associated with the additional works. I wanted to understand, when I heard this morning you're going to be seeking even further delegated authority, what delegated authority are you going to be seeking beyond what is a precedent-setting number of delegated authorities in this report? Could you hold my clock?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, with respect to the real estate matters, we don't believe that this is unprecedented.
I just want to ask this deputy city manager said there will be a report with additional delegated authorities to come, and I'm wondering what those are.
Well, right now, we're just reviewing the schedule and what might be needed, particularly since there's going to be a council recess for delegated authorities so that we can ensure that we're not holding the projects up. Their timelines here are quite tight. A lot of the procurement packages are out and the construction is set to begin, so we have to make sure that as a city, we've done our due diligence and are ready to proceed.
Okay, you're clearing the decks, that's for sure. I wondered if you could tell me what is the value of the, or estimated value of the lands that we're giving to Metrolinx? You must have done some estimation.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, we're still working through that analysis. So
you have a
we've analyzed-
ballpark?
No, we don't. So we've analyzed the properties for their intended use and the types of properties, but not yet.
Councillor Davis,
value.
first of all, you should know you actually have 5 minutes to ask these questions.
Oh, I thought I had 3.
No, it was 3
I'm
minutes
sorry.
applied to the deputants.
Okay.
And, but secondly, I'd ask that you not
Thank
interrupt
you.
somebody who's answering a question, if you'd be so kind. Thank you.
It answered it. Okay. The answer was, we haven't got a value yet on those properties. I want to ask about the governance model and the restructuring that's anticipated in this report. Is this restructuring of creating some special unit or a new transit something or other going to be fully remaining, just yes, no, fully remaining within the jurisdiction of the City of Toronto? Could you answer that? It's not going to be some kind of joint thing that's arm's length. There's a reorganization that is recommended not specifically in the recommendations, but it says you're going to be putting together a whole separate unit of people working on this. Is it fully in the Toronto Civil Service, or are we creating some hybrid?
So currently, we're working together as a team to figure out what sort of a structure or function do we need within the city to provide appropriate oversight to make sure there's many components to this, and we have to make sure that they're all aligned so that one doesn't get delayed and then impacts another.
My question is that it's all internal to the City of Toronto. We're not looking at some arm's length hybrid governance model with our staff going over into something different.
No, we're looking at a function within the city to provide that oversight.
Great. There's no information in here about ridership, and all of the costings, I presume, are based on some assumptions about fares and ridership. And and I presume you're estimating based on what fares? TTC fares?
Through the mayor, there are ridership figures in the report. We see a total of Smart Track bringing 33 million additional riders per year to...
Yes, sorry, yes, there are numbers.
Right. In terms of the costing figures, ridership doesn't factor into the costs of the capital. The ridership, the factors that are important in that have to do with employment and population figures that we'll see around the Smart Track stations.
Are the...
But ridership doesn't affect the capital costs.
That is not my question. My question is, are you assuming still on the operating side that the costs that will be assumed by Metrolinx, are they based on maintaining fares, and how at a TTC level, I know it's $3 now announced through the budget, how are we going to assure those fares are maintained if we are no longer receiving the revenues, operating the system?
Last question.
City manager, I guess. I don't know.
Through the mayor, we will be negotiating an agreement with Metrolinx in terms of, as part of our overall relationship on that fare setting. So that
we don't know what the fares will be.
So the co-fare program was launched, and all we know right now is that the province did commit to, through the budget, to that $3 fare within Toronto.
Okay, so we don't know what the fares will be. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Councillor Layton.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So the report recommends entering into an agreement whereby Metrolinx will own and operate these new stations, all the new stations. Both those built by the city and built by the province, correct? Or so what will be the difference? So I'm walking to a station, I'm looking at a station map. What will be the difference in the way they look? What will be the difference between Smart Track and RER at the point when the province is operating both?
Through the mayor, these will look like urban GO stations. We are still working out with Metrolinx some of the details around branding and recognition of the city's investment in this.
So the vehicles that will operate on them, do we know what those are?
These will be GO trains that are operating to the Smart Track station.
So let's just be clear. It'll look like a GO train station. It'll be the same cost as a GO train station in the city of Toronto. The fare will be the same. It'll be operated by those that operate GO train stations, and the vehicles will be GO trains.
Through the mayor, that is correct.
So essentially, it'll look like, and they'll operate at the same frequency as GO trains within the core.
That is correct.
In the city. So essentially, it'll look and feel like you're at an RER station. You'll feel like you're on the provincial RER.
Through the chair, through the mayor, the service frequencies that we have negotiated with Metrolinx are the frequencies that they will be providing along the RER network, along those corridors. It will be operated by GO trains. You are correct.
Operated by GO with GO trains. Yeah. Can I ask can they change the frequency of the vehicles, or is that a negotiation that they won't be able to change? Or are they locked into that level of service?
Through our agreement, we have locked into 6 to 10 minutes during peak and the 15 minutes during off-peak.
Okay, good. On the payment side, so I have my Presto card. If I was getting on to, let's say I take a bus to a GO train, either one of the new stations that we're paying for or the ones they currently operate, so I tap on the bus, that's a $3 tap. I tap on the GO train, that's a $3 tap with a $1.50 back. And then what if I was going to another, like Union Station, to then take a ride on the GO train, or the subway from Union to, let's say, coming to City Hall, to here. That's a third tap. What's that? let's add that up. So the $3 tap from the subway, the $3 tap from the GO, minus the $150 co-fare, and then you tap on the subway again.
Should come out to $450.
It should come out to $450. So if you're, but if you were taking a bus to a TTC station, and then taking that subway to wherever, that's a $3 trip. So there will be a $1.50 premium to ride on the Smart Track or on Go RER, right? Is that just so we know what it is now?
That's my understanding.
Okay. Can I get very, very specific for a minute, just because I may run out of time? The Liberty Village station. Everyone wanted it originally further east where the sort of heart of the residential was for Liberty Village. Why can it not be done there?
Through the mayor, there are some significant engineering constraints along the corridor that wouldn't allow Metrolinx to widen the corridor and insert platforms any further to the east. So in their analysis, they've placed the platforms where they can work given those constraints.
Essentially, we'd have to expropriate 120 townhomes and probably lower King Street by a couple feet to a couple meters to accommodate the additional tracks over King Street, right?
You are correct, Councillor.
Now, the report that was presented to councillors in the briefing before this said that in order to achieve the higher end of the tax increment financing, we will need to relax planning regulations in some of the areas. For Liberty Village, would we need to relax the planning regulations in this already intensified community?
Through the mayor, that was a scenario that was put forward in the SRRA report. It was for the purposes of having a low and a high bound for the analysis, but that was not something that city planning would support, and indeed the level of development in Liberty Village is already fine. So we would not be looking at relaxing that.
I would just add to the comment through the mayor that the city will be undertaking major transit station area analysis in conjunction with all of the Smart Track stations and other transit facilities in the city in order to conform with the city, with the provincial growth plan, the 2017 growth plan. So that's work that lies ahead. So we'll be doing further assessment and analysis in association with all these stations to certainly meet the minimum growth targets that are in the growth plan and to see what we can do to richly deliver on development opportunities in association with these stations.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Layton, are there any other visiting members of council that are wanting to ask questions of the staff or about the presentation? Okay, we could move to members of the committee. Okay, well, Councillor Thompson, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I guess through you to the city manager, acting city manager, the grade separation that we talked about some time ago, specifically at the Progress and the Midland area, what's the status of that? It was my understanding that there was going to be some discussions with respect to that. Where are we on that?
I will ask planning. James, if you could respond to that, please.
Through the mayor, as per motions that council passed in the last couple of years, we have raised with Metrolinx the city's interests or concerns about a number of other intersections where there should be grade separations, including Progress. Metrolinx is continuing their analysis on those and have identified them as sort of the next phase of grade separations. We continue to push on that, but they have not yet made a decision to fund those additional grade separations. What are their criteria with respect to identifying and areas that they've identified that would be suited for grade separation? For example, I believe that there is the Scarborough Golf Club Road. There is a grade separation being proposed by Metrolinx there, yet it doesn't have the same capacity with respect to either traffic and activity as the Progress and Midland area that I'm speaking of. So what's their criteria?
So through the mayor, I can't answer fully what Metrolinx is considering in their decisions. However, there is a calculation that's a general practice across the rail sector that looks at the volume of rail traffic on a corridor multiplied by the volume of road traffic crossing to come up with a bit of a factor to determine the need for a grade separation. But there are other factors that they've included, and certainly Metrolinx's priorities were to try to separate all crossings along the Lakeshore East corridor, which is the Scarborough Golf Club Road.
Right. And so on page 12 of the report here, it talks about the implementation consideration. You talk about the number of positions, the 24 Smart Track and the 32 for RER. So we're paying for those, and we will be given it'll be a charge. Will it be a charge back at a later date that will be paid by GO back to the City of Toronto?
Through the Speaker, certainly all of the staff complements that are being proposed to deal with the RER program are completely funded by Metrolinx.
Okay.
And so there will be opportunities to recover all of those costs and to enter into agreements for cost recovery.
Right. And so just to be clear, with respect to the questions that I had heard Councillor Layton asking, so we're paying, and you went through the numbers in your presentation, at the end of the day, Metrolinx is going to own those stations that we're actually paying for. Is that correct?
At the end of the day, Metrolinx will own the stations, will procure the stations, will operate the stations, will be responsible for O&M as well as life cycle maintenance.
Okay.
And we will be making a contribution towards the 6 Smart Track stations.
And the proportion of our contribution is what proportion to that of Metrolinx?
So Metrolinx is investing $13 billion in RER. We are recommending that our contribution towards the construction of those 6 stations be capped at $1.195 billion.
Okay. I guess through you to the DCM, the city manager. I'm so used to calling you DCM, the interim city manager. I have a motion that I'm going to be moving today, which really talks again about the great separation on the Stouffville-Barrie line that affects the area in question with respect to Midland and Progress. Because as I see it, when I look at Scarborough Golf Club Road and the answer that I've received from staff, which talks about the activity level and so on, there is no way that when I look and examine those 2 locations, that the Scarborough Golf Club Road proposal would actually supersede that of Midland and Progress. Much more activities there. Are you okay with respect to a continuance with respect to a motion that will seek to address this issue? Yeah. Last questions.
I would just want to review the wording of the motion. As part of our agreement with Metrolinx, the city would contribute, and staff can correct me if I'm misunderstood it, but my understanding is the city contributes 15% to any of the grade separations for the RER portion. Yeah.
Thanks, Councillor Thompson. Deputy Mayor Bailao.
Thank you. So just to review this, so RER at the $13 billion, would it have a station at King and Liberty? Would it have a station at St. Clair and Weston? Would it have any of those stations? Would it stop? Would the train stop in there to pick up people in there?
Through the mayor, the program is clearly the additional 6 Smart Track stations. That's basically the overall investment that the city's getting. Otherwise, those stations wouldn't be part of the package.
They wouldn't be. And the additional service at 6 to 10 minutes would not be part of the pack as well, correct?
That's correct. That's part of the service concept.
Okay. And there's still the operational agreements, you're still negotiating that, right? So we're still going to have an opportunity to go over those agreements to understand what guarantees we have on certain aspects of the operation of the system, correct?
That's correct.
And with relations to the fare, So we've just got announced that there's a $3, so right now we are at $4.50, but that is also something that is still being negotiated. Is that correct?
Through the mayor, there are still details related to how the fare will be implemented, that some aspects of the provincial announcement that we will need to work out with Metrolinx, yes.
So since this conversation has started, we've already been able to get quite a number of results. We've brought back the fares to what are today $4.50, which are significantly lower from what they were 3 years ago. But this is not our end result. Is that correct?
Certainly, we are continuing to push on other things related to fares. As an example, I don't know what the end result will be. With
relation to the land deal, so there's a lot of land that is being looked at, not only for our stations, but for example, we had deputations here about the Kitchener corridor and the West Toronto rail path. There's a lot of land exchange happening because of all these projects. How are we involving the local councillors and the local communities with this delegated authority that you're asking in here?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so the process by which we engage the public in the property matters will be handled as it does today. There will be engagement of the public, and that would be a partnership between Metrolinx and the city, depending on the significance of the transaction, of course, right? Because much of the property is little bits and pieces and slivers.
And I noticed that you're having somebody hired to deal with parks. Is it to deal with projects like this way, like the Guideway and the connections to Earls Court Park and connections to the West Toronto Rail Path and all that?
Yes,
Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
There are other public realm improvements, so it touches a lot of divisions. That's why it's an interdivisional package that we put forward in the proposal.
Okay. With the station at the Liberty Village, the pedestrian bridge is included in the cost, in the base cost of the station. Is that correct?
Through the mayor, that is correct.
Okay. And with regards to the St. Clair Master Transportation Plan, is any of it part of the $268 million for city services? Or is this a completely different budget that we still have to go through?
Through the chair, it's not included in the cost estimates that are before you. We will be coming back as part of the budget approval process to deal with those costs.
Okay. And with regards to, you said, planning said that we are looking into the planning around the stations, transit-oriented development around these stations. When should we expect something of that nature to come back?
Through the mayor, the transit-oriented development initiative will be, we're starting that analysis. We've already started that analysis, and that'll be playing out over the next several years. We've got, I believe, 3 years, up to about the end of 2020 to conform with the provincial legislation.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor
Sorry,
Barlow.
sorry.
Deputy Mayor Barlow.
Sorry, one more question.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, go ahead.
As you, Mr. Mayor, you were in my community meeting about Smart Track, and I cannot go without asking about the famous bells. And I know that they clearly indicate that this is not so much provincial and municipal jurisdiction, but I think we have a role to be a strong advocate for residents that live around these stations towards the federal government. So are we doing that work?
Through the mayor, with Metrolinx, we have been discussing opportunities to look at train bells and whistles. Metrolinx has initiated a feasibility study to look at alternative options. They're also looking at their current operations of trains to see if they are exceeding current requirements. So we will continue to report back as we report on Smart Track and RER.
Thank you.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Barlow. I should just tell you I've also raised this with the CEO of Metrolinx, and we'll be pressing forward to sort of see, consistent with what Ms. Thorburn just said. I had Councillor Ainsley, I think, next, didn't I? And then I had Councillor McMahon, I see, with her hand up, and Councillor Palacio.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Tory, I had some questions about the tax incremental financing. My understanding or my math, so when we look at the TIFs and development charges, that's going to be about 60% of the total project financing for the city or by the city for our portion?
Yes, the TIF revenue, through the chair, as well as the development charges, are to account for about 2/3 of the debt service costs associated with the initiative.
Okay, and when it comes to TIFs, what we basically do with that is we're using TIFs to borrow against anticipated revenue from future development, correct?
Through the chair, the bond is essentially to be repaid back through the incremental revenues that accrue in the TIF zones.
Okay, and from going through the previous reports on this project, so at one point we were anticipating, our staff were anticipating that the level of TIF in that overall pot of money was going to be 50%, and now it's down to 39%, or $292 million?
Yes, it's roughly 1/3 of the amount that's required.
Okay, and so when we're looking at TIFs, so the zones that I was looking at or that we're going to be using, it includes not only around the 6 smart track stations that we're building, but it also anticipates collecting that same revenue from GO train stations that we aren't building on the smart track line?
Through the chair, the TIF analysis assumes 14 TIF zones, including some of the GO station zones. And the rationale behind that is because we're getting a much greater level of service frequency, and that will result in additional development in those areas. But to be clear, the majority of TIF revenue is derived from 2 key stations within Smart Track. These include the East Harbor as well as Liberty King.
Okay, and so we're looking at $292 million in TIF funding, correct?
That is correct, over a 25-year period, and that only represents a small fraction of the actual tax increment that will accrue in those TIF zones.
Okay, and the underlying claim that we can raise that much money through TIF, like we've never done, nothing like this has ever been done in Canada before, correct?
That is correct, through the chair. However, we've done an incredible amount of due diligence over the course of the last year. We've retained a number of planning consultants, a number of financial consultants, and we think that the estimates that are being provided here are highly conservative and very prudent.
So the $292 million, that's a conservative estimate for TIFs?
Over a 25-year period, it is.
Okay, all right. And then I wanted to ask, I'm not sure who to ask about this. There was a Metrolinx report that came out last week about service levels, and they're different than the service levels that we have in the report before us. So, how do we reconcile the two?
Through the mayor, Metrolinx is still, I'll answer this in 2 ways. Metrolinx is still working through some aspects of the service concept. However, we have negotiated with Metrolinx the service frequency that is reported in the staff report, the 6 to 10 minute frequency during the peak periods and the 15-minute frequency off-peak periods. That has been negotiated directly with Metrolinx and indeed was part of the July 2016 integration business case for Smart Track that we presented to council.
And sorry, if I could supplement that, Metrolinx will also be including the 6 to 10-minute peak service concept within the project-specific output specification documents in the procurement package for Smart Track as well.
Okay, but this report just came out last week, and you're talking about negotiations that were done previous to that, and the numbers are still, they're not in sync with what we have before us today.
Through the mayor, the report that Metrolinx released last week was an explanation of some of the analysis that went into what they called their preliminary design business cases, which was the next phase of business case. Those business cases were done a few months ago, and that was simply an explanatory report about how they went about their analysis. It did not, it was not meant to say this is the end point for the service concept.
Okay, all right. And
that was your last question, Councillor.
That was my last question? Okay, thank you, Mayor Tory.
Thank you. So we move then to Councillor McMahon, I believe.
Okay, and I just had some questions about the fares. So how much is it to get on Smart Track?
Pardon me, could you repeat the question?
How much is that? How much does the fare cost to get on Smart Track?
So based on the provincial announcement, the fare within the City of Toronto on any GO line will be $3.
$3. How significant is it for us to obtain that kind of fare?
Through the Mayor, I think that's a really significant improvement. When we came to Council on Fare Integration over the last couple of years, we talked about the importance of fares for driving ridership, and also that we should be looking at improved fares not just on the Smart Track corridors, but on all the GO corridors.
So it's good news.
So it's great news.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McMahon. Next was Councillor Palacio.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, it's to the Chief Planner. Within some of the stations, and most of the stations that are proposed, is there any opportunity to have a municipal comprehensive review and look at before the 5-year official plan review that studies that we usually have that will allow that sort of regeneration and growth in some of these transportation corridors?
Through the Mayor, the city is, as council is aware, completing its current municipal comprehensive review. It's currently at the OMB. When that municipal comprehensive review is completed, the council can consider commencing a new municipal comprehensive review. We're hopeful that we'll be able to commence that in 2019. As I indicated earlier, we also, in order to conform with the growth plan, have to commence station planning, major transit station planning, and these issues will be coincident for some of the stations. Some of the stations are located, for example, in employment areas. So we'll have to review and consider all of the issues, especially in close proximity to the transit stations. And I would just generally say that that would be the opportunity. The best way for the city to consider any land use conversion questions, for example, would be through that approach and through that citywide lens, in order to protect our interests, our long-term interests around employment growth and managing our population growth.
So there will be a report coming to City Council early next year?
I indicated that we would commence, put council in a position to commence the next municipal comprehensive review in 2019. Whether it's early, mid, or late, I don't know.
Thank you. My next question is with regards to the St. Clair Station. We have the St. Clair Master Transportation project that's underway. That's been coordinated also with the Smart Track Station. Now, those two joint ventures, and there was a sense of purpose for that. Now, within the presentation of city staff, and there was a comment that if the financing is in place, so my question to you with regards to that is, given that the whole area in terms of connectivity for public transit, including the transit station, is there any discussions with Metrolinx in relation to who is going to pay for or how that's going to be distributed?
I believe Mr. Farag responded to a related question earlier, that will be part of Metrolinx procurement, but as a separate item in order for the city to then identify any opportunity at that point to pay the cost of it or otherwise negotiate the cost of it. But it is related. Opportunistically, there are efficiencies in order to look at the Smart Track work and the implementing the transportation master plan at the same time, and that's why we're advancing the recommendations we are to have it considered through the procurement process, so it gives the city an opportunity to evaluate its options.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Palacio. Councillor DeGiorgio.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of quick questions on slide 13, Mr. Farag. You can get, this is the city building fund. I just want to make sure that I've got it. straight in my mind. By 2025, is that city building fund likely to be in excess of 500 million? Is that fair?
By 2021, the city building fund will generate on an annual basis $74 million. So I would expect that the cumulative amount between 2017, when it was first initiated, to 2025, quick math would be in the order of 400 to 500 million.
In excess of 500, okay. That's question number one. And then in 25, we will be using a quarter of that annual 74.2 million that's generated to be allocated to the repaying of the loan. Is that correct?
Through the chair, yes, we anticipate that we'll use about a quarter of the proceeds within that city building fund to offset the debt service.
Okay. The last question then is, given that the city building fund was originally set up to finance both transit projects and affordable housing projects, has there been any allocation out of that city fund up to this point?
Through the chair, there has not. We are proposing that we do this as an inaugural allocation, if you will, towards this project. So this will be the first allocation. In the future, though, council will have to put its mind to how it wishes to utilize that fund on specific projects.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor DeGiorgio. Councillor Shiner.
Thank you, Mayor Tory. Either to the city manager or to Mr. Farag, the total expenditure the city is going to have for the 6 stations is $1.5 billion.
Yes, that is correct.
Is there a Metrolinx contribution to those stations?
No, through the chair, under the term sheet that was negotiated and approved by council in November 2016, that set the framework for the cost-sharing arrangements between the city and the province and Metrolinx. And that term sheet contemplated the city absorbing all of the costs of the stations, whatever they may be.
Okay, so other expansions to the GO Rail system, I heard, what's the provincial contribution then? Because I see a federal contribution.
Yeah.
Provincial contribution to these stations.
So, through the chair, the provincial contribution towards RER in total is $13 billion, expressed in, I believe, 2015 dollars.
And that's expanding the GO system outside of Toronto, is that correct?
That includes electrification, which benefits all stations across the corridors.
So is it expanding the system or electrification?
It's.
And do you have a breakdown?
I do not, through the chair, I do not have a breakdown. We can certainly provide it before council.
So is a fair amount of it then electrification?
There's a substantial amount of it is related to electrification.
How many new stations are there?
New stations, both in Toronto as well as outside of Toronto.
How many stations outside of Toronto?
6. I believe there are 6 stations outside of Toronto.
What's the contributions from those municipalities towards those stations?
To my knowledge, Metrolinx is in discussions with those municipalities. I do not have a definitive answer for you today.
Is there any requirement for them to pay any of their stations at this point in time? We're doing 6, $250 million a station, $250 million each for $1.5 billion. There's 6 stations outside of Toronto. Is there an equivalent contribution being negotiated for those municipalities to pay for those stations?
Through the chair, I'm not aware of any discussions that have transpired between Metrolinx and those municipalities.
In your numbers or your cash flow, you show, I think there was a number for the feds of $500 and something million. I'm looking for the page. What page is that on?
It's 9.
So 585 million is a federal contribution?
Through the chair, yes, that's depicted on slide 9 of the presentation.
That's over how many years?
So Through the chair, our contribution is likely to be made in 2025 upon substantial completion of the project. And it's anticipated that the federal government contribution will flow to the city through 2 Metrolinks from the city at around that time frame.
So 7 years from now.
Yes?
In our negotiations, have we brought up the fact that from new development in the city of Toronto, the economic impacts, and you gave me some numbers previously, the federal government receives sales and income taxes of $740 million every year? So in those 7 years, you'd be talking the neighbor half of almost $3 billion they'll receive, and our contribution's only $585 million. And that's just from new development. Have those numbers ever been raised?
Through the speaker or the chair, of course, we've engaged the federal and provincial governments, and we've had many discussions about the fiscal impact of land development across the city and the extent to which the federal governments and the province benefit from those types of developments. It's not clear to me that that has resonated with Queen's Park in Ottawa, but it seems to me that under the PTIF federal funding program, they're investing in the order of $5 billion in transit infrastructure in the city. The province is matching that to the tune of $4 billion. So there is, I think, recognition of the importance of those contributions towards vital transit infrastructure in Toronto.
So last, can you explain to me better the tax incremental financing where you have $17.5 million a year coming in? Are we taking out debt for that until we are able to receive the revenue? And how do you expect and when do you expect to actually receive any revenue from tax increment financing?
Final question.
Thank you for the question. We anticipate that the tax increment funding will come towards the latter end of the planning horizon. And so on an interim basis, we'll be utilizing portions of the proceeds from the city building fund as well as development charges, which will likely flow earlier on. As I mentioned, the debt isn't going to be incurred until 2025, so we will have a period of time where we're going to generate interim funding to finance that debt when it occurs.
Thank you very much, Councillor Shiner. Councillor Pasternak.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just following up on some of Councillor Shiner's questions. The $1.6 billion price tag, that is for 6 stations that we have elected to add to the network.
Through the chair, it's actually $1.463 billion, and it's capped at that amount, and it's expressed in 2025 dollars.
Now, when I see a GO train station or even some of the mock-ups of what we're looking at Smart Track, I see a concrete platform. I see some overhangs, some benches, maybe a planter, some lighting. When I compare that to the stations that we've just opened from Shepherd West Station up to Vaughan City Centre, which were $200 million each, which are enormous physical structures below and above ground, I really question, maybe you could shed some light on what we're paying for and why a concrete platform with some roofing and a couple of benches is a little over $200 million.
Through the mayor, the cost of putting in a station go beyond the platforms and the overhangs. There are changes required to the corridor in order to be able to spread tracks out, in order to be able to put in platforms and actually create a station. There are other infrastructure improvements that may be needed on bridges that are adjacent to or indeed part of some of the stations. So there's a longer list of infrastructure improvements, also signaling and other kinds of improvements that are required in order to make a station fit and be operational in there. There will be then further design and wayfinding and things to improve the public realm around the station. So it's not just concrete, Councillor.
I realize it's not just concrete. The GO train system, there's a wide range of costs for them. They range from about $100 million to about $200 million, depending on on where they're going and the nature of the station. Is this comparable to a traditional GO station? Are the smart track stations?
Through the mayor, we're trying to insert 6 new stations into a very developed urban context in most cases. And so I think the challenges in some of these locations are greater than if you were putting a station at Mulock or Kirby, where you've got greenfield development. And so I think that has an impact on the overall costs. And I don't know that we could say they're completely comparable to a traditional GO station out in suburban GTHA.
And finally, Councillor Shiner made reference to the other municipalities that are on this network. It comes up every time, and we're given the same answer every time. They're not contributing at a dime. Can we make the assumption that if stations were included in the original RER platform or the RER proposal, those municipalities don't have to contribute a dime unless they want additional stations within their municipal border? And they will never contribute a dime.
Through the mayor, we're not privy to those conversations, so I'm not sure if there's any arrangements between Metrolinx and those, or the province and those municipalities.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Other questions? Because I have some if everybody else has had their opportunity. Okay, I'll just change the clock. Just go through, if I can go through these fairly quickly. First of all, whoever wants to answer, I want to sort of make sure we're clear in light of some of the mistaken impressions people might get from some of the questions earlier asked by, in particular by Councillor Layton. Smart Track was always on the RER rails. Is that correct? I mean, it was always going to operate there. There was never any concept of separate vehicles or separate trains. It was always going to be built on the RER platform, as it were.
That's correct.
Okay. Just with respect to the stations, can I just draw your attention to page 3 of attachment 1? And it just says there, just to read what it says in the report, the Smart Track Stations program is the incremental infrastructure the city is nominating and funding above and beyond the province's planned investments in the regional express rail program. And then it goes on to talk about the 6 stations. So it's clear to me from that, but would you agree with me that that means these stations would not have been built if we hadn't negotiated with them and in fact, as it turns out, agreed to undertake to pay for the amount we're paying, which is capped?
That's correct.
Okay. So we are in because there's been questions raised 2 or 3 times about the fact that other people may not be paying. I don't really know myself what arrangements there may or may not be with other people, but we are paying because we believed as a city, approved by the City Council, that it was in our interest to have these 6 stations that otherwise would not have formed a part of RER were it not for the fact that we wanted to initiate the Smart Track program inside the 416.
That's correct. We wanted to increase the mobility options for Torontonians within the city.
All right, and this was covered as well, but I want to just cover it again because, again, I think Councillor Layton's example he gave, and I know we could come up with a different number of examples, but he gave examples that involved sort of buses and trains and no planes and automobiles, but there were certainly buses and trains. When it comes to a choice people would have, as of the provincial announcement in the budget, that if you use Smart Track or the TTC, the fare that you will pay will be the same. It'll be a TTC fare. Is that correct?
Within Toronto, it will be $3.
Within Toronto. So that the Smart Track, people getting on at any of the Smart Track stations or GO stations inside the City of Toronto will pay $3, which is the same as they pay to get on the TTC. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And am I also correct in having heard, I think, some of our officials answer the question that with respect to other matters that may involve the interchange, if I can call it that, between the TTC and GO, there have been some steps taken there, but it's not the end result. I think was somebody said the end state. There is continuing discussion between the city and the province with regard to what I'll call a more complete fare integration that would mean you could move seamlessly not only between the TTC and GO, but perhaps even between other transit systems in the region and the TTC without having to pay twice. You just pay once. It's an integrated fare, and that's that.
So to date, we've negotiated the co-fare program, which was implemented in January, and through the provincial budget, they have committed to look at other improvements to encourage ridership. So through that process, we will try and to endeavor to continue to negotiate things that would be beneficial to Torontonians.
All right. And then there was a question about the service levels and whether the 15-minute service level was it. And in fact, can I just ask that I draw your attention to page 29 of the report, the 44-page report. And it's just one example where there's a map here that actually has some very helpful little balloons on it. And am I correct that the service levels, in fact, as has been said, I think a number of times, just to be clear, it says on the sort of what's noted here is kind of what I'll call the western portion. It says 6 peak-hour trains stopping every 10 minutes. And then over to the east, it talks about trains every 8.6 minutes. And then down towards the south, it talks about trains every 5.5 minutes. And this is the service level that's included in the report and contemplated by the agreement and is very much what was said, which is a service level that is between, I think it's 5 and
6 to 10 minutes during
6 to 10
peak
minutes.
and 15 off-peak. And yes, this is the service concept that was approved back in 2016 as part of the term sheet, and it continues to be part of our term sheet.
And again, clarifying an impression that might have been lost from Councillor Layton's questions, this service level is part of the overall deal. So when people say, well, what do you get for your contribution to this, and what is different than just RER, and it's all just GO trains by another name, am I correct that the service levels, I'll call them the enhanced service levels beyond 15 minutes, in other words, better than 15 minutes, is part of the deal? And what we get in return, among other things, is this service level, which is better than 15 minutes.
That's correct.
All right, and then finally, the last question on TIF, just to ask two things. One, I'm correct, again, that I think you used the words very conservative, but the TIF allocation that has been made here as part of the overall way to pay for this is but a small portion of what could have been taken by way of the anticipated tax increment that's going to be achieved as a result of the smart track development. And I think you indicated you'd had this peer reviewed or otherwise examined by outside people to make sure that our estimates were correct, and then you applied a conservative lens to that to make sure we weren't making a commitment here that couldn't be met.
Yes, in fact, we've had two analysis conducted, one by Ernst & Young, the other by Hampson Consulting, and both have confirmed that the estimates that we've provided in our report are conservative. And just to answer the first part of your question, Mr. Mayor, we're actually allocating 15% of the TIF revenue in those corridors to fund the debt service. So we're only taking 15 cents out of every incremental tax dollar to do that.
Thank you. That's my time. I guess we are finished with questions of staff, and we have about 7 minutes left before we break. We could hear the first of the speakers from one of our visiting members of council if they wish to speak. Councillor Layton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And I'm flattered that so much time was taken to clarify some of the questions I asked earlier. The reason why I had a line of questioning that was focused on what things look like and how different they are is I think at some point in time we're going to probably have to bring these lines into the TTC's branding. Because if we're calling one set of transit one thing and one set of transit another thing and yet another set of transit another thing, that's problematic to people that are visiting our city and trying to get around our city, to announcements being done in our city about how we communicate. That's why we went from Bloor Danforth and Young University to 1 and 2 and Shepherd to 3. If we're going to start naming them and having interesting, fun names related to what they roll on, I would argue that maybe we call Young University the busy track. Maybe we call line 2 the over-under track. Maybe we call line 3 the underused track. And then maybe we call the addition to the one-stop subway in Scarborough the wrong track. The reality is, though, we're just going to have to get used to this branding. And don't get me wrong, those questions in no way were to suggest that I don't think that this is a positive thing, that I don't think the city is now taking some steps forward. I would argue that perhaps not all the decisions that are outlined in the report are good ones, but folks that have been at council in the previous term will know that I fought quite passionately with Councillor Nunziata and others to increase the number of stops on the Barrie line so that they could serve Liberty Village, so that they could serve the Weston neighborhood. This was something that I had been invested in since 2012 when I started a petition to support a track at this location in Liberty Village. To that point on Liberty Village, though, I just want to make clear that that it's unfortunate that it's not going to better serve the residential portion of Liberty Village that has been living without transit for so long. But this station, along with the improvements to the RER station at Exhibition Place, along with the new local road that you will be voting on later today as part of the development charges bylaw, all that together will ensure that the growing number of people that live in Liberty Village will have better access to transit. For that, I'm thankful of the Mayor's direction on this and on the development charges bylaw. Where my concern lies, and one side is that question of the fare, because I think we'll probably end up redirecting some of our bus traffic to some of these RER stations rather than just continually direct them to the stations on the subway line, partly because we want to strike more of a balance. And that's what hopefully these stations will get used as transit nodes, not as places that people are only walking or driving to. We will want to redistribute our transit load off of Line 1 and Line 2 and onto these smart track stations. I think it'll work. But my worry is that if people are paying once at their bus, or I just wanted to make it clear that if people pay once at their bus and then again at the RER and then again when if they have to take the subway to get those last couple stops once they're in the core, that they shouldn't expect to be just getting there on the $3 fare. I wish it were the case. I do, though, think that the steps that have been made will help mitigate some of the cost to those transit riders. And I would remark that the reason why you don't have to pay the second time on the TTC if you take it again is actually precisely because of a 2-hour transfer. And that is an initiative of the Mayor and Council this term. That would make it that trip isn't $7.50 rather than $4.50. So I think we can make it work, but I just want to make sure we're not kidding ourselves with with current transit riders that their ride won't change, and there may be a premium if we are going to be using these corridors. Maybe that's a good trade-off. And to be honest, I did surveys in Liberty Village, and people were willing to pay a little bit more if they needed to avoid that King streetcar during that morning rush, because it's a 55-minute ride now from Liberty Village down to the subway, and it's a 10-minute ride on the Exhibition streetcar. So I applaud the efforts that are being made. I think some of the decisions around how we fund such an endeavor may be overly optimistic. They may be relying too much on untested measures. We may be putting a lot of eggs in one basket. We're going to have to come back to fund these with the ever-popular property tax. But I think that's something that we're going to need to be brave on and say, you know what, we are putting some of your property taxes into these vehicles now for precisely the reason the Mayor said, because we are willing and quite enthusiastic about making these investments in a better Toronto. But at the same time, if these other mechanisms don't work out, we may have to go there again. And I just want to make sure that that's crystal clear with the public.
Thanks, Councillor Layton. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your indulgence to just move a motion to continue. We just have here with us Emily Daigle, who we know, and she did communicate with the clerk's office this morning that she was having some trouble getting here on Wheel-Trans and had communicated her desire to depute on this item in advance of the closing of the deputations. And so with your concurrence, I would ask that we would revert to deputations, and we would give her the same 3 minutes we gave to others, and do that because she took so much trouble to get here. And then we would finish that, and then go to lunch. Is that agreeable to everybody? All in favor? To extend and to hear Ms. Daigle? Thank you. Emily, you're most welcome, as always.
Hey, everyone. Sorry about this, and I very much appreciate your indulgence. I also very much appreciate the ability to come here. My sidewalks are not cleared in my area, and the curb cuts are not cleared, so I had to beg for a Wheel-Trans ride. I have 2 points to make very quickly. One of them, I've lived in Ward 43, I've lived in Ward 38, and now I live in Ward 28. The first thing I want to say is that those of us with disabilities, and no one has said this today, not one person in this room has brought this up. I listened to all the deputations on YouTube on my phone. No one brought up the fact that those of us in wheelchairs and with disabilities already know what a one-stop subway looks like. Because when you live in Scarborough, you can't get anywhere. You have to use Wheel-Trans. Because for my husband, when we lived at Lawrence and Green Cedar, which is near Cedar Brae Mall, my husband could get on the 9 Bellamy or the 102 Markham Road. 20 minutes later, he'd be at Warden Station. Myself, it would take almost an hour to get to Kennedy. Because of bypassing, because of different inaccessibility issues, Lawrence East RT is accidentally accessible. And what I mean by that is one direction, so southbound from Scarborough Town Center to Kennedy is accidentally accessible to the buses because it's a same level transfer. Otherwise, it's all stairs. When I lived in Scarborough, there was a lot of times where I would, and I hate to say this, and any of my Go Transit friends and police officers, I'm sorry, and to Alex Fundeck, I'm sorry, but I would hop on the Lakeshore GO train at Scarborough GO and come downtown because otherwise it would take 2.5 hours. And I would fare evade. Yes, me, I would fare evade. And Paul knows this because I used to live in his ward at the Family Res Homeless Shelter where there was no soup kitchens anywhere nearby. And my husband and I needed to eat and the kitchen was inaccessible there. So those of us that lived in Scarborough, we know what it's like. Now I come from Ward 28. Yes, I live in the Pan Am Athletes Village. Yes, we have streetcars. Yes, we have bus service, but it's incredibly unreliable. And anyone that thinks they can put transit down Front Street, go look at the Route 121 Fort York Esplanade and go see what an absolute gong show that is. I want to thank you for thinking about transit, but I also want to remind you that when you build transit, when you build this Smart Track and TTC, most people in Scarborough that are disabled will not be able to afford it. And if you put more people on buses, we won't afford to be able to get around. Because Family of Services is happening. Wheel-Trans have a 10-year strategy. We don't want to take Wheel-Trans. We want the ability to just jump on TTC. But with the crowded buses, and if we have to pay a double fare to get on Smart Track and then TTC or in reverse, we can't afford it. And just remember, Gary Crawford has Variety Village in his ward. It's the only fully accessible recreation center in the city of Toronto that's designed for people with disabilities, much less the GTA. Paul Ainsley, who's reading right now, has one of the most beautiful parks in his ward. He has Go Transit in his ward, but he also has one of the most dangerous intersections in his ward, Lawrence and Kingston Road. Please remember when you build this Smart Track, when you build the Go RER, when you build the Eastern LRT, remember this. Why can't we just replace the RT, which is a piece of garbage, and I have to sit in doorways, and my husband and I have been brutally attacked because there's no cameras on the trains? Why don't we just replace it with a busway? Do an Ottawa trick. Make a transit way out of it. Something. Please. Because the residents of Scarborough that have disabilities, and some of them live in Michael's ward, Councillor Thompson's ward, at a big, tall, white building in his ward. We can tell you how inaccessible Scarborough is. That hasn't been brought up. We already know what a one-stop is, and it fails us every single day. It's 2.5 hours from Progress and Shepherd to downtown to come eat at a soup kitchen, because there's nothing out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily, because I gave you the 5 minutes, even though it was 3 this
Thank
morning.
you,
and
Mr.
Thank you,
Tory.
because I think your comments were worthy of
I
putting on the
appreciate
record.
it.
Are there any questions of the deputant? All right, well, thank you for all the trouble you took to come, and your message, I think, was important to us. Thank you very much. And we will reconvene at 1:30. Thank you.
Sorry, Paul.
So you'll bring that
I
stuff
miss
forward
living
to
in
put
your
on,
ward.
the new